Chapter 1092. The Great General's Samurai Team? Matsumoto Kazuma's face changed. They are the elites of the Great General's Guard. How many people have tried to assassinate Ashikaga Yoshimasa, but they have been saved by this team, and they have become the same trump card as the ninja team. It's just that the former is more suitable for defense, and the ninja are more suitable for assassination. Originally, these two lines don't intersect, one in the light and the other in the dark. But why would these samurai attack the ninja? Even if he disappointed the great general, he shouldn't send people to deal with him, right? What exactly had happened that he didn't know about? The doubts on Matsumoto Kazuma's face were seen in the eyes of the four jonins, and they became even more anxious. The samurai's movements were very fast. Coupled with their preparation, the ninja's team had already suffered a lot. If they don't escape in time, I'm afraid they won't even have the chance to leave this place. One of the jonins was so anxious that he ignored Matsumoto Kazuma, who was still immersed in his fantasy, and took the initiative to step forward and grab his arm and said, "Kun Matsumoto, leave here first. As long as you are still alive, there is still hope for our ninja." The other three jonins also made a sound and tried their best to cooperate. "I won't go, I want to have a good talk with them. Why do they want to attack our ninja? Does the great general know about this?" Matsumoto Kazuma's temper rose. He thought that the samurai team's actions were private, because ninja and samurai are usually opposite, and the two sides have not seen eye to eye for a long time. He has reason to suspect that these actions are to vent their anger, because as long as the great general is not stupid, he should know that there is no benefit in killing him, and on the contrary, it will make the opponent laugh secretly. This kind of thing that hurts the family and makes the enemy happy. Matsumoto Kazuma doesn't believe that the great general will do it, so he went out to reason with the people who came. For this reason, he even broke away from the outstretched arm of the jonin on the side, pushed open the bedroom door and walked out. The courtyard that belongs to the ninja has long been designated as a training base, so the area here is not small. At this moment, the people here have long been fighting in a group. There are ninja corpses everywhere, and the air has long been filled with a pungent smell of blood. When Matsumoto Fuma walked out, he saw this scene. He also happened to see a samurai holding a bushido and slashing at a genin. Out of instinct to protect his companions, he jumped out and kicked the samurai's wrist, forcing him to retreat, and then he shouted, "What are you doing? Who gave you the right to attack? Kun Matsumoto, are you finally willing to come out?" The short silence was broken by a burst of laughter. A man, who is slightly taller than the ordinary people of the Japanese Empire, walked out of the crowd. He is 1.78 meters tall and has a strong aura. His appearance is very dazzling for the people who are less than 1.7 meters tall. The man walked out in large strides, and when Matsumoto Kazuma saw him, he couldn't help but stare at him and said, "Yamaguchi-kun, you came in person?" Yamaguchi Fukada, ninja general Ashikaga Yoshimasa's bodyguard, and also the captain of the samurai team. He is one of the most trusted people of the ninja general. Oftentimes his appearance and actions could directly represent the supreme general, which was why Matsumoto Fuma was so surprised. Looking at Yamaguchi Fukada, Matsumoto Kazuma couldn't help but think, is all of this really the ninja general's idea? "Yes, I came in person. Since Kun Matsumoto is here, can you ask your ninjas to stop first? I also know that you must have a lot of questions, so you can come with me to see the ninja general, and if you have any questions, you can talk to him face to face." Yamaguchi Fukada said with a very reasonable appearance, and his words were full of consideration for the other party. These words moved Matsumoto Kazuma. Although he is very sad about the hundreds of ninjas who have fallen to the ground and died, he wants to know the reason. So after hearing these words, he bowed deeply to Yamaguchi Fukada, who is more than 10 meters away, and said, "Thank you, Yamaguchi-kun. Since that is the case, I am willing to go with you to see the ninja general and make things clear." "Kun Matsumoto, you can't?" The four jonin behind him shouted anxiously. Since the samurai has already made a move on the ninjas, this is originally the result of a fight to the death. How can they easily believe the other party? "Enough. Don't say any more. I believe in Yamaguchi-kun's character. I am willing to go with them to see the ninja general." Matsumoto Kazuma waved his hand. In order to show his sincerity, He also took out his ninja sword and handed it to a jonin behind him, then turned around to show that he has no more weapons. Matsumoto Kazuma's sincerity is already full, but Yamaguchi Fukada on the opposite side seems to be not satisfied. Instead, he said, "And the medicine bottle on your body, take it out, I don't want you to go to the ninja general and play tricks." The so-called medicine bottle refers to the auxiliary substance used by ninjas to perform ecstasy jutsu and other means. Just like a cloud of smoke, the ninja will disappear. This is the function of the medicine bottle. The thing inside can make light have a certain chemical reaction for a while, thus achieving the goal of helping them escape. Since they are old rivals, how can Yamaguchi Fukada not know what other things Matsumoto Kazuma has? So he said, "Okay, I will hand them all over." Matsumoto Kazuma was very cooperative, took out a porcelain bottle from his body, and handed it to the person holding the sword behind him. Then he looked at Yamaguchi Fukada in the distance and said, "Now there is no problem, right? You can take me to see the ninja general." "Kun Matsumoto, please." Seeing the other party so cooperative, Yamaguchi Fukada nodded with satisfaction, then made a sideways movement to lead the way. "Please." Matsumoto Kazuma said so very politely, then strode forward, straight toward Yamaguchi Fukada's position. His action also attracted the attention of the ninjas present. On the surface, Matsumoto Kazuma looked relaxed, but with every step he took, he was ready to make a move at any time. What he was thinking was not as simple as what he showed on the surface. Even at this moment, his whole body was tense. With a smile on his face, Yamaguchi Fukada let Matsumoto Kazuma approach, until the distance between the two sides was only 1 meter. He still didn't have any intention to make a move. Instead, he turned around and really wanted to take him to see the ninja general. "All samurai, listen to my order. Without orders, you are not allowed to attack anyone." "Yes." The hundreds of samurai who had arrived all nodded in agreement. Then, one by one, they held their samurai swords in their hands. "Thank you." Seeing that Yamaguchi Fukada was so trustworthy, Matsumoto Kazuma also breathed a sigh of relief. Then he also shouted loudly, "All ninjas, listen to my order. Without orders, you are not allowed to attack anyone." Hundreds of ninjas also responded in unison, each put down the katana in their hands, and some of the injured ninjas simply sat on the ground, then called their companions to bandage their wounds. After Matsumoto Kazuma did this, he looked at Yamaguchi Fukada and said, "Yamaguchi-kun, I will have to trouble you to lead the way. You are too polite, please. By the way, Kun Matsumoto, do you know why the ninja general ordered you to be taught a lesson?" Yamaguchi Fukada asked with a meaningful smile on his face. This was the question in his heart. At this moment, Matsumoto Kazuma was really too curious. "Oh, I'll tell you." Yamaguchi Fukada stopped moving forward, turned around, approached Matsumoto Kazuma, and then looked like he wanted to whisper something. Cooperating with the other party, Matsumoto Kazuma also leaned his head over. He also wanted to hear what was going on. If he didn't solve this mystery, even if he saw the ninja general, he wouldn't know what to say. He leaned his head over, but because his head was lowered, he didn't notice the flash of pride in Yamaguchi Fukada's eyes. When the distance between the two people was infinitely close, suddenly there was a pain in his waist. At this moment, a katana was stabbed into Matsumoto Kazuma's waist, and blood quickly dripped down along the blade. Yamaguchi Fukada suddenly made a move, showing the neon people's untrustworthiness, insidious, and cunning. His men, who had already put down their katanas, also made a move. They didn't even need anyone to give the order. The sharp blades slashed at the ninjas who had already aimed at them. This sudden turn of events was out of everyone's expectations. Most of the ninjas were still sitting on the ground, or enjoying the help of their companions, but they were already killed by the katana. The situation instantly became one-sided. In just a few breaths, no less than dozens of ninjas were killed because they were unprepared. Why is this? Matsumoto Fujina covered the katana on his waist and stared at Yamaguchi Fujita in front of him with a pair of disbelieving eyes. Why? At this moment, Yamaguchi Fukada no longer had a smile on his face, but returned to a cold state and said, "Because of the incompetence of your ninjas, the assassination failed, and you were captured alive. Now the 5-star army has declared war on the Supreme General. Now their vanguard army is about to reach Ping and Beijing, and this place is about to fall into the hands of others. With such a big mistake, do you think the Supreme General will forgive you? Why do you think this is? In a short period of time, Yamaguchi Fukada continuously threw out so many questions and truths, making Matsumoto Kazuma stand there. For a while, he was at a loss. The assassination of the 3 ninjas at the north entrance of the village really failed, but why were they captured alive? Even if they couldn't escape, they should have died. Their teeth are highly poisonous. How could they be captured alive? Chapter 1093. After telling the answer, Yamaguchi Fukada looked at his old opponent Matsumoto Kazuma's painful expression and couldn't help but laugh proudly. This time, he didn't only want his opponent's life, but he also wanted his opponent's despair. Only in this way can he be considered to have defeated his opponent. After laughing, Yamaguchi Fukada once again raised the butcher's knife in his hand. Looking at his appearance, it was clear that he wanted to continue to chop down and end his opponent's life. Kuen Matsumoto, quickly leave. A figure suddenly rushed over, and when the knife fell, it was chopped on the figure. Looking carefully, it was one of the 4 ninjas who persuaded Kuroto to leave. He used his body to block the knife, giving Matsumoto Kazuma a glimmer of hope to survive. The knife fell, but it didn't hit Matsumoto Kazuma's body. Yamaguchi Fukada's eyes showed a trace of anger. He pulled out the knife and slashed again, but he lost the opportunity to kill, because the other 3 ninjas rushed over. 2 of them waved their swords to block the knife, and the other ninja carried the stunned Matsumoto Kazuma and jumped toward the courtyard. Obviously, he wanted to take him away from here. Want to leave? Yamaguchi Fukada's face didn't show any panic. Obviously, he was very familiar with ninjas, so he was already prepared. He smiled and waved his right hand. The moment he waved his hand, 200 shadows suddenly appeared around the courtyard. They were wearing samurai clothes, and they were holding strong bows and crossbows in their hands. Their standard and uniform movements proved that they were a well-trained army. When 200 shadows appeared, many ninjas' eyes showed a look of horror. Some people couldn't help but shout, "My God, Divine Archery Battalion!" The Divine Archery Battalion was composed of the best archers in the Japanese army. They not only have nearly 100% accuracy in archery, but also undergo strict physical training. According to the founder of this army, General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, this army must be able to use bows and arrows, and use swords to kill the enemy. The requirements were too harsh, so it has been established for a long time, but the number of people has not been very sufficient, only 500. It became a trump card in the hands of the general, and he won't act rashly. What Kuroto didn't expect is that this time, in order to deal with ninjas, he actually dispatched 200 people. It seems that this time Kuroto is really angry, and he wants to destroy this ninja unit that he used to be proud of. When he saw that it was the Divine Archery Battalion, Matsumoto Kazuma, who had a knife in his stomach, stopped the idea of continuing to escape. Originally, he was injured, and it was difficult for him to move, so the chance of escaping was very slim. Now, there were fully prepared divine archers on the periphery. Doesn't this mean that the inescapable net has been set up, and even if he wanted to escape, there would be no chance for him to escape? Instead of being killed while escaping, it was better to stay and fight, and die together with his brothers. At least he can gain a reputation for loyalty. Matsumoto Kazuma pulled back his hand and said to the jonin who was helping him to leave, "Forget it. There is no chance. It is better to fight with all our strength, and kill a few more people is equivalent to revenge for our brothers." The jonin didn't speak. At this moment he didn't know what to say. Yes, since the Divine Archery Battalion has appeared, how can there be a chance for them to escape? Since he was going to die, he might as well go all out before he died. One was an injured special ninja, and the other was a jonin. The 2 were holding ninja swords back to back. They relied on each other, but at the same time, they also turned their backs to each other. They were ready to kill the enemy at any time. Matsumoto Kazuma stopped running, and Yamaguchi Fukada laughed proudly. Is this old opponent finally going to accept his fate? Does he really think that death will be so easy? He wants to watch this old opponent die step by step. Even if he dies, he won't let this old enemy die easily. Yamaguchi Fukada, who was laughing, showed a gloomy look on his face. After that, he made a gesture, and most of the 200 soldiers of the Divine Archery Battalion adjusted the angle and target of their arrows, leaving only 20 people to stare at Matsumoto Kazuma. Matsumoto Kazuma saw the excitement of the soldiers of the Divine Archery Battalion, and he had a bad feeling, so he exclaimed loudly, "No, don't." As if to confirm his guess, as soon as his shout fell, hundreds of arrows broke through the air and shot toward those ninjas who were desperately resisting in the courtyard. Originally, they were in a disadvantageous position. After being attacked suddenly and being schemed by Yamaguchi Fukada, the number of ninjas has sharply decreased, and only 1/3 of their strength was left. The arrival of this wave of arrows accelerated the process of their death. Especially in front of them, there were samurai who were entangled with them, so they couldn't do anything to dodge. Many ninjas were killed by the arrows. The archers of the Divine Archery Battalion were worthy of their title. Every arrow was shot with a very clear target, and they could bypass the samurai and hit the ninjas. They were either killed by an arrow in a vital part of their body or pierced into their arms or legs, reducing their mobility and agility. With just one wave of arrows, at least 50 ninjas died tragically on the ground, and dozens of others suffered different degrees of injuries. This made the situation worse for the ninjas, who were already in a bad situation, and even their resistance became weaker. "No, don't. I'll fight with you." Watching the ninjas he trained hard and his companions who have been with him for many years being shot one by one under his eyes, Matsumoto Fuma's eyes were red, as if they were about to spit out flames. He wanted to kill all the enemies. In anger, Matsumoto Kazuma completely ignored the knife wound on his abdomen. Even if he was injured, a special ninja was still a special ninja. Like a cold wind, he killed his way into the samurai who were showing off their might, and then stabbed his sword to the left and right. One by one, the samurai who were unprepared, or who were prepared but had no power to fight back, became sheep in the lion's mouth, became the target, and were stabbed to death on the ground. Originally, he had a face full of laughter, imagining how painful it would be for Matsumoto Kazuma to watch his subordinates and companions die one by one. Suddenly, when he saw this person move and kill several of his subordinates, the smile on his face disappeared and was replaced by anxiety and anger. A person who was about to die, an ant that he could trample to death at any time, dared to resist. This was unacceptable. Yamaguchi Fukada roared, and then rushed toward Matsumoto Kazuma with his sword. At the same time, he didn't forget to make a shooting gesture toward the surrounding walls. The expressions of the 20-God Arrow Battalion and the Master Archers were also very ugly. Originally, they thought that Matsumoto Kazuma was already a fat piece of meat on the chopping board, and they could decide his life and death as they wished. But they didn't expect that he dared to resist, and in such a short time, he even killed 2 samurai. This was simply a provocation to their archery skills. "Release the arrows." A captain couldn't help but shout in his heart, and the arrows of the 20 master archers also moved along with Matsumoto Kazuma's movements. The advantage of ninjas was their flexibility and the strangeness of their figure. When it came to face-to-face combat, they were not as good as samurai. This was also the reason why ninjas were always suppressed in a head-on battle. But when they were able to fully exert their advantages, like Matsumoto Kazuma now, who was constantly moving among the samurai like a civet, it was impossible to completely capture his figure. The archers finally found a chance to shoot a few arrows, but not only did most of them miss, but one arrow even hit a samurai's body, accidentally injuring one of their own. Matsumoto Kazuma's speed was so fast that it was beyond his usual level. He also saw that the wound on his lower abdomen was constantly dripping blood, and he knew that if this continued, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to live long, even if others didn't kill him. Since he knew that he was going to die, what was there to be afraid of? He just had to give it his all and kill as many people as he could. It could also be considered as an explanation to his brothers as a captain. At least if they could be together after death, he wouldn't be ashamed of anyone. Matsumoto Kazuma, who was close to madness, became synonymous with the Grim Reaper. Wherever he passed, samurai fell to the ground. Most people only saw a shadow appear, and then they felt a pain in their body and lost their senses forever. Because of Matsumoto Kazuma, the courtyard became more and more chaotic. Originally, it was only a one-sided battle, but now it became a situation where everyone could become prey. At this moment, on another high wall 500 meters away from the courtyard, a group of black-clothed men were lying there, as if they were a layer of black tiles on the roof of the courtyard. If it wasn't for someone speaking at this time, no one would be able to tell that everything in front of them was made of human bodies. "General, please save our comrades and our captain, he's about to die." With an anxious expression, Chuishiki used his binoculars to see everything clearly, and finally couldn't hold it in and begged. At this moment, Chuishiki wasn't interested in asking what the binoculars in his hands were, or how it could close the distance between them. Right now, he only wanted the people around him to help and save Matsumoto Kazuma and his brothers. "That's right, General, please act quickly. As long as you can save our captain and comrades, I'm willing to swear that I'll be loyal to Bugnam of Gojoseon for the rest of my life." Yu Suzuki also spoke. Compared to Chuishiki, he was willing to swear his loyalty. Other than Kitamura, who was still recovering from his leg injury, Yu Suzuki and Chuishiki, who hadn't fully recovered from their shoulder injuries, were also here. The reason why they were here was all because of Yang Chendong. Chapter 1094. The ambush at the foot of the mountain not only failed to kill Yang Chendong, but even Long Wei, who was beside him, was not killed, only 2 of them were slightly injured. In exchange, 2 of the special ninjas were injured and 1 was captured. In the end, all 3 of them were captured alive. After the 3 of them were captured, Yang Chendong first handed them over to Beta Persei. He believed that with the interrogation and torture methods he and Beta Persei had learned, it wouldn't take long for the 3 of them to suffer a fate worse than death. They would forever regret the moment when they had the idea to attack him. But things were always unexpected. Princess Junko suddenly came to his door. After there was no one else in the tent, she knelt on the ground in front of Yang Chendong's puzzled eyes. She knelt in front of her husband. "Madam, why are you doing this?" Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with doubts. He thought that he knew the student whom he had known for several years very well, but at this moment, he was also stunned by Junko's sudden action. "King." After hearing Yang Chendong's unique name, Junko slowly raised her head. "King, Junko begs you, don't kill those 3 people. They are the best talents of the Japanese Empire. They should be used by King, and they shouldn't die in silence like this." Junko actually wanted to save the 3 special ninjas, which was really beyond Yang Chendong's expectation. As far as he knew, when the emperor was still in power, these special ninjas gave him a lot of problems, and he didn't even know how many times they had opposed him. They were supposed to be enemies, so why would she plead for mercy for the other party? Yang Chendong's doubts were seen by Junko, and she actually smiled and said, "King, Junko really hates them. But it's even more clear that they are just following orders. Junko's real enemy is Ashikaga Yoshimasa. In order to achieve this goal, other people can be used and cooperated with." She even said something like making use of him. It can be seen that she was indeed standing on Yang Chendong's side, and she even forgot her identity as the princess of the Japanese Empire. These days, with Junko's understanding of the 5-star army gradually deepened, especially after seeing the bravery of the 1st Cavalry Division, although she was unwilling, she had to make a judgment. The 5-star army was too strong. It was so strong that the disordered Japanese Empire couldn't stop it. If the Japanese Empire was truly unified in the hands of her father, with a strong military base, she would still fight against him. But now, the Neon people's minds were in chaos, and there was constant fighting among the higher-ups. More than half of their strength had been consumed, and now Neon was more fragile than ever. In the face of the powerful 5-star army, defeat was certain. It was just a matter of time. The result was already decided. Junko was a smart person. Since she was a little emperor, she had never done anything that went against the heavens. What she thought about was how to maximize the benefits, how to turn all the disadvantages into advantages. Even if she knew that the rise of the 5-star army was inevitable, how to preserve the strength of the Japanese Empire became something she must consider. Although she didn't dare to have extravagant hopes of reviving her country, she didn't dare to imagine that even if Yang Chendong had become her man. As a person who was born in a country where women's rights weren't valued, she had such thoughts and awareness since she was a child. It didn't matter if she couldn't revive her country, she didn't dare to force it. What she wanted was to leave more seeds for the Japanese Empire, leave more marks. At least, when people talked about it, the future generations would know that there was a Japanese empire in the past, and that was enough. To achieve this goal, the spread of ninjas was undoubtedly the key. In a sense, when people talked about ninjas, they would naturally mention the Japanese Empire, and that was enough. In order to achieve this goal, the 3 special ninjas under the rock couldn't die. This was the reason why she came to see Yang Chendong, and she didn't hesitate to kneel down as soon as they met to achieve this goal. Junko opened her mouth to plead for mercy for the 3 special ninjas, which was somewhat beyond Yang Chendong's expectation. Confucius said that only villains and women were difficult to raise. One of the meanings was that women were often emotional creatures. Logic had little effect on them, and they were often more used to acting on their emotions. With this point in mind, Yang Chendong never thought that Junko would plead for mercy for any of Ashikaga Yoshimasa's subordinates. Even if the death of her father's family wasn't directly related to those people, there was always an indirect relationship. It would be good if she didn't come to beg him to kill all of them. How could she plead for mercy for them? Junko's abnormal behavior also attracted Yang Chendong's attention. He discovered that he had been underestimating this woman. She was really worthy of being born in the imperial family. Her behavior was really different from others. This move also successfully attracted Yang Chendong's attention. She was even willing to let go of her father's death. Such a woman really made people vigilant. Madam Hachi, what are you doing? Do you want to use them for yourself? Yang Chendong asked bluntly. Without any probing, he directly spoke out his thoughts. When the words came out, Junko's face suddenly stiffened. She knew that her behavior was misunderstood. She also knew that once Yang Chendong had a bad opinion of her, she was afraid that she would never be happy. Even if it was for herself, she had to explain clearly. My king, I don't want to use them for myself. Since I gave you my body, I have paid all my feelings. I just want to be the 8th madam, and I don't have any thoughts or desires. If my king doesn't believe me, you can send someone to send me away now. I promise that I won't complain. Junko raised her head and looked at Yang Chendong with a very firm look, expressing her feelings. The 2 of them stared at each other in this way. At this moment, Yang Chendong seemed to be able to see Junko's heart through her eyes. This scene lasted for about 3 or 4 breaths of time. Finally, Yang Chendong took the lead to turn his head to the side. He didn't want to doubt Junko. He also liked this lovely but ill-fated girl. Whether it was out of pity or affection, he didn't want to give up on her so easily. Therefore, he didn't want to guess her real thoughts. Well, I believe you for the time being. Then tell me, if you don't want to take them for your own use, what are you trying to do? Yang Chendong asked. Facing this question, Junko was determined to be honest. She knew that there weren't many chances for her to explain. If she didn't seize this opportunity, she was afraid that she wouldn't have another chance to explain everything and tell her thoughts. My king, Junko knows that this time, the Japanese Empire is doomed. Perhaps it won't be long before the Japanese Empire becomes a province under the 5-star army. Speaking of this, the corner of Junko's mouth couldn't help but twitch slightly. After all, the motherland was about to be destroyed, no one would be happy. But when she thought about how her parents and brother died in the hands of her own people, she thought that even if the Japanese Empire was powerful, it wouldn't be able to escape the sharp sword of the 5-star army. She quickly felt relieved and continued to say, the Japanese Empire becoming a province under the 5-star army is a good thing for the people. Junko is happy for them. Oh, you really think so? Yang Chendong suddenly interrupted and asked. For Junko, who had already become his 8th wife, Yang Chendong didn't want to force her. But today, since they had talked like this, some questions that were usually difficult to ask could be asked clearly. He hoped that through today's conversation, they could completely eliminate the last barrier between them, and become a truly selfless husband and wife. Junko said with a very firm tone. The Japanese Empire becoming a province under the five-star army is naturally a good thing for the people. They can forever avoid the flames of war and live a peaceful and happy life. This is of course a good thing. It's a good thing for the people, but for the higher-ups of the Japanese Empire, it's not necessarily a good thing. Yang Chendong said again. At the same time, he stared closely at Junko, wanting to see her true thoughts. That's right, it's not a good thing for the higher-ups. But the royal family has been destroyed, and for Junko, there are no higher-ups. Now, Junko is not a princess, but a commoner, the eighth wife of the king, that's all. Since she wants to be a wife, why does she still care about the ninjas? Yang Chendong didn't believe Junko easily, especially this woman was a member of the royal family of the Japanese Empire. The shadow of the future was too big, and he didn't want the country that he worked so hard to build to be stolen by an outsider, even if that person was his wife. When it came to the main topic, Junko didn't have the slightest intention to hide, and took the initiative to explain. Junko just wants to leave a mark on the Japanese Empire, and at the same time, as a former princess, I want to do something for them. Besides, ninjas are a very strong force. In the past, when the emperor was still alive, he once said that ninjas have many branches, but because they can't unite together, they can't use their full strength. My king, if you want to conquer the world and create miracles in the end, wouldn't it be better to have as many strong helpers as possible? Since you can give a chance to the foreign cavalry on the grassland, why can't you give a chance to the ninjas? Junko said all the words in the bottom of her heart, and then looked at Yang Chendong intently. The look in her eyes was very strong. It was obvious that she hoped that Yang Chendong would agree, so that she could do something for the Japanese Empire and live up to her identity as a princess. Even if one day she went to the ground to see her father, she would have something to explain. Yang Chendong didn't answer immediately, but constantly analyzed the pros and cons in his heart. No one knew better than Yang Chendong what the Japanese Empire's people were like. When you were strong, they would kneel down and lick your boots. When you were weak, they would find all kinds of excuses to bully you. Chapter 1095. Yang Chendong didn't like such national characteristics, so he only thought of one way to deal with the so-called ninjas, which was to eliminate them. Completely eliminate them. As long as he killed all these ninjas, there would be no such title in the future. Only then could he rest assured and leave everything to his descendants. However, Junko's words were also not wrong. Why could he tolerate the grassland people joining the five-star army, but not the ninjas? Since he knew that the people of the Japanese Empire respected the strong, as long as he was strong enough, he didn't need to worry about them rebelling against him one day. If he was really worried, he could just get rid of them after he conquered the world. Yang Chendong felt that he was in the wrong when dealing with other people, but when it came to the Japanese Empire, he didn't think that there was anything he couldn't do. After a full quarter of an hour of silence, Yang Chendong didn't say anything. Junko was waiting on the side, just like a suspect in a court of law, waiting for the final verdict. Finally, Yang Chendong opened his mouth and looked at Junko. I can agree to your request, but do you have a way to persuade them? This was equivalent to agreeing, so Junko was naturally happy. However, what she said next made Yang Chendong a little dumbfounded. My king, Junko doesn't know how to do it, but the omnipotent king will definitely think of a good way, right? There was no way to explain things, and all hope fell on himself. At this moment, Yang Chendong wanted to slap his forehead and sigh, but he didn't. As Junko said, he was the omnipotent king. Of course, there was nothing that could be difficult for him. Well, if that's the case, I still need Madam's cooperation. You can do this. Yang Chendong quickly thought of a way. Although he couldn't guarantee that it would work, he didn't need these ninjas. With such a preconceived idea, it wasn't difficult to think of a plan. Yang Chendong's idea wasn't that brilliant, but it was very effective. First, he asked Junko to visit the 3 special ninjas as the princess of the Japanese Empire. She wanted to get closer to them, and at the same time, express her respect and love for them. During the contact, Junko represented Yang Chendong to express the importance of ninjas and promised to help them develop. After the implementation of the plan, Sure enough, the performance of the three special ninjas was not as stubborn as before. As I said before, the growth process of a ninja is destined to not be able to distract their attention. They can't be too entangled with the secular world. They can only rely on other rich clans to grow up effectively. Considering that the training process is too long and requires more financial support, it effectively hinders the development of the ninja team. This was also the reason why they were under the control of Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Compared to the other forces, this general was very rich. He can only be regarded as very rich, but compared to Yang Chendong's wealth, he can't be compared to him. When Junko said that Bugnam of Gojoseon was willing to provide 5 million silver a year to support the training and development of the ninjas, the three were moved. With this money, they won't be disturbed by the secular world, and it won't be long before they can restore the glory of the ninja team. This was a proposal that they couldn't refuse. Of course, if they can be bought with money, then it would be too easy to deal with. In fact, it is precisely because they are not good at scheming, and it has been proven that people with distracting thoughts will not make any progress in their ninja training, so they are more honest and grateful than the average person. Considering that they have always received the kindness of the general, the three didn't immediately agree, but told Junko that they want to see Bugnam of Gojoseon before making a decision. This was within Yang Chendong's expectations. No matter how much a person dreamed, they had to learn to bow to reality. When Junko came and said that the three special ninjas wanted to see him, he didn't hesitate to agree. From the bottom of his heart, Yang Chendong is still very optimistic about the strength of the ninjas, because even in the future, the name of the ninjas is very famous, and they have become the spokesman of the military force of a certain island country. At that time, all kinds of high-tech weapons were rampant, but they still have such an influence, it can be seen that their background and lethality are powerful. If they can be subdued, then needless to say, they will be a big help. As for whether the people of the Japanese Empire are trustworthy, he naturally has confidence. After subduing them, they will not have a chance to rebel. This confidence comes not only from the wealth he has now, but also from his martial strength that has almost reached the level of a grandmaster. Grandmaster. From ancient times to the present, it has been mentioned by many people, but there are not many people who have really reached this level of strength. Zhang Sanfeng, the founder of Wudong, is one person, and Yang Chendong undoubtedly has such strength. Even with the faint 5 stars in his body, he can go in and out at any time, which is to say, he has reached a realm where he can disappear into thin air. This is very mysterious, and Yang Chendong doesn't know why such a thing happened. Unable to understand, he could only attribute all this to luck. Perhaps God hoped that there would be such a person who could spread the spirit of Huaxia and unify the world. Unfortunately, this person had chosen him. In the big tent, Yang Chendong saw the 3 special ninjas under the rock. Among them, Kitamura was carried in a single stretcher. The 2 crossbow wounds on his legs were far from being able to recover in a short time. Fortunately, the treatment was timely, and after careful treatment, there shouldn't be any sequelae. Accompanying Yang Chendong were Junko and Beta Persei. In the face of the 3 special ninjas, 2 of whom have recovered all their strength, Yang Chendong can still face them calmly. From this point, one can see the strong confidence in his heart. At the foot of Little Een Mountain, Yang Chendong originally had the ability to take down the 3 people in a short time. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't know whether the other party had a backup plan, he wouldn't have given the other party so many opportunities to show off. Yang Chendong was calm, and even his sitting posture was very relaxed. However, Beta Persei, who was standing beside him, was very nervous. His right hand was already on the sword, and he looked like he was ready to attack at any time. He knew very well that at such a close distance, if something happened, he was afraid that he wouldn't even have a chance to shoot. That being the case, he might as well draw his sword. Since he was following the young master and was responsible for his safety, Beta Persei was naturally very cautious. Outside the main tent, the 2 captains, Chiu Vi and Dao Xiao, each led 50 of the most elite Longwei to guard the tent. If there was any movement in the tent, they would immediately rush in. In this way, Beta Persei's nervousness and Yang Chendong's relaxation formed a sharp contrast. This was not only felt by Suzuki and Yui Suzuki, but also Junko, who didn't know any martial arts, could feel it. But she wasn't afraid at all, because Yang Chendong was by her side, and he was her king. As long as her king was there, she instinctively felt a strong sense of security. "You want to see me?" After a brief silence in the main tent, Yang Chendong was the first to break the silence. Yang Chendong spoke in fluent Japanese, which saved Junko the trouble of translating, and he could clearly express his attitude through his tone. "Yes, we want to talk to Bugnam of Gojoseon." Suzuki took on the role of the main negotiator. Speaking of which, his language skills weren't that great, but compared to Yui Suzuki, who was even more taciturn, he was much better. "Then let's talk, tell me your conditions and requests." Yang Chendong nodded lightly and said casually. But in fact, he was the one who took the initiative in the conversation. Yang Chendong intentionally gave the other party a chance to speak, and even put on a serious expression. Finally, after nearly an hour, the two sides finally reached an agreement under Yang Chendong's control. This content was also proposed by Yang Chendong. According to Suzuki's idea, they could join the 5-star army and complete some assassination missions that couldn't be exposed. But at the same time, they also put forward a request, which was the amount of rewards they could get for completing a mission and how much training money Yang Chendong would give them every year. Regarding this, Yang Chendong directly shook his head and rejected. He didn't want a cooperative relationship, but a pure relationship of superior and subordinate. In other words, these ninjas could only have one master, and what they wanted to do in the future would be decided by that person, and that person was no doubt himself. Suzuki naturally wouldn't agree to this, and even Yui Suzuki, who had been silent all this time, also shook her head. But then Yang Chendong proposed a plan, and the two of them made the final concession. "How about this, let's make a bet. You promise this king one thing, and do it, then this king will bet that your Grand Admiral will make a move on Matsumoto Kazuma. If he doesn't, then not only will I give you 5 million silver, I will also send you safely away, and we will be even. Of course, if you lose, I will still give you the 5 million silver, but from then on, you must treat me as your master and listen to my orders. How about it?" Yang Chendong smiled as he gave a suggestion. When he finished, Suzuki and Yui Suzuki's eyes widened. It was just a bet, and no matter who won or lost, they would still get 5 million silver. That was 5 million silver, and once they got it, it would be enough to support their development for several years, and the ninja team would also welcome a brand new change and a huge expansion. This kind of bet, as long as one wasn't an idiot, they wouldn't refuse. "Okay, we agree." Just by looking at each other, Yui Suzuki could tell that Yui Suzuki was just as tempted as he was, so he agreed on behalf of both of them. Chapter 1096. Just like that, the bet was made. Yang Chendong also told them what he wanted them to do, which was to publicly announce that their assassination attempt on Yang Chendong was ordered by the great General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, and announce it to the entire Japanese Empire. Just this? Chuishiki asked in disbelief. Yes. Yang Chendong gave a very certain answer. Originally, the three of them came to assassinate Yang Chendong because of the great general's order, and they didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. Furthermore, they were all enemies, so wasn't it normal for them to try to kill each other? They were just telling the truth, so it wasn't a big deal. Therefore, they would be able to get 5 million in funding for the development of the ninjas. No matter how they looked at it, it was a profit. Chuishiki and Yui Suzuki didn't have any reason to refuse, so they agreed immediately. Seeing the two of them agree so quickly, Yang Chendong couldn't help but smirk. He knew that he wasn't far from conquering this powerful ninja force. Because he knew what kind of consequences would come after this matter was announced to the world. Ashikaga Yoshimasa wasn't just a simple martial artist, he was also a political strategist. Even if some things were true, they couldn't be publicly announced. On this point, Yang Chendong and Ashikaga Yoshimasa had the same idea. Chuishiki and Yui Suzuki, on the other hand, were too naive, and they would eventually take the initiative to become Yang Chendong's subordinates. The facts also proved that Yang Chendong's idea was correct. When Chushi and Yui Suzuki suddenly appeared in public and pointed out the fact that they were ordered by the great general to assassinate Emperor Wu Nan of the Ming dynasty. Unfortunately, they didn't succeed. The Lu 4th Division and the Lu 7th Division, who had already arrived at Neon, cooperated with each other and launched an attack on the nearby Ping capital from the Sanyang-Sex Bomo area. The 100mm mortars that had been prepared beforehand were fired like raindrops, and they instantly destroyed the first line of defense set up by the great general. The 30,000 Japanese army didn't even see the shadow of the 5-star army, and thousands of people were killed or injured, and then they hurriedly retreated. When the news reached Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was still occupying the flat well field in the Hokuriku, he was furious. Seeing that the largest resistance force in the country was about to be annihilated, the sudden change in the situation in the south caught him off guard. According to the report of the scouts, the 5-star army's attack is very fierce, especially their artillery. How can he defend against an enemy that he can't even see? Under this situation, not only will the 50,000 Japanese Empire's garrison not be able to stop the 5-star army's attack, but the Japanese Empire's capital, Ping and Beijing, will also be lost. And all of this was caused by the words of the ninja, which directly tore up the agreement between the two sides. At this moment, the great general hated the ninja to the core. At this time, the samurai captain Yamaguchi Fukada stood up and said that the ninja should be taught a lesson and let others know what the consequences of betraying the great general are. Regarding this, Ashikaga Yoshimasa also nodded in agreement. He also needed a way to vent his anger, and Matsumoto Kazuma was undoubtedly the vent. That's why Yamaguchi Fukada appeared in the ninja compound with 200 elite samurai and Matsumoto Fuma. That's why the ninjas resisted and Matsumoto Fuma went all out. Yang Chendong had long expected that Ashikaga Yoshimasa wouldn't tolerate the betrayal of his subordinates, so he arranged for Tai Hu and Baizua, the two captains of Wolf Fang and Ghost Shadow, to sneak into Ping and Beijing to rescue Matsumoto Kazuma. According to the information obtained from the intelligence department, Matsumoto Kazuma was different from the 3 special ninjas under the rock. This person had some tricks up his sleeve. If this kind of person was used well, it would naturally save a lot of effort, but if it wasn't used well, he would become a poisonous snake that could bite at any time. Then how to subdue Matsumoto Kazuma would require some brains. At least it wouldn't be as simple as dealing with the 3 special ninjas under the rock. This was the reason why Tai Hu and Baizwa didn't immediately act when they saw the samurai make a move. These 2 captains weren't in a hurry because they had already received orders from the 6th young master. However, Suzuki and Hei Ishikaga couldn't do it. Seeing their commander Matsumoto Kazuma fighting with his life on the line and bleeding profusely, they couldn't bear it and kept begging Tai Hu and Hei Ishikaga. They even swore an oath to be loyal to Bugnam of Gojoseon for generations. Whether it was Suzuki or Hei Ishikaga, they didn't expect that they would lose the bet. The assassination was originally the Supreme General's order, and they were just executing it. In any case, they were already enemies, so it wasn't a big deal to tell the truth. They really didn't think that Ashikaga Yoshimasa would make a move on Matsumoto Kazuma because of this. Isn't this kind of internal strife destroying one's own strength and raising the prestige of others? But regardless of whether they could think it through or not, it really happened. Now they didn't have time to think too much, they just wanted to save Matsumoto Kazuma and save more ninjas. Matsumoto Kazuma was already an arrow at the end of its flight, and he was fighting with all his life's potential. Tai Hu and Baizwa naturally saw this scene clearly. After hearing Hei Ishikaga's and Hei Ishikaga's words of loyalty, and thinking that they had completed the 6th young master's mission, they finally decided to stop watching and make a move. After all, they still have a mission to save Matsumoto Kazuma and more ninjas, otherwise, if they die, the meaning of their presence here will be a lot smaller. Sniper, aim at the target and prepare to shoot. Langya, prepare to engage the enemy in close combat, and at the same time prepare the medicine. The 2 captains prepared to shoot at the same time. In the courtyard, Matsumoto Kazuma was still desperately trying to stab with his sword, because the wound on his abdomen was bleeding a lot. He knew that he was going to die here today. Knowing that he was going to die, he wasn't so afraid, he just wanted to kill a few more people before he died, and it can be regarded as revenge for his brothers. Yamaguchi Fukuda was watching from the side. He didn't choose to fight with Matsumoto Kazuma. In his view, a dying man is still likely to have great potential. What he needs to do is to wait for the other side to continue to consume his strength, and when he completely has no power to resist, he will kill him to show his strength. Yamaguchi Fukuda didn't make a move, which created enough opportunity for Iron Tiger and the others to save Matsumoto Kazuma. In the mainland, more and more ninjas died, and when the situation was about to be settled, suddenly, on the roof of the courtyard, several archers tilted their bodies and rolled down from the courtyard wall. The sudden scene made many people very puzzled. What made them even more puzzled was that in just a few breaths of time, close to 10 more master archers threw down the bows that they relied on for survival and laid flat on the roof. No matter how others called out to them, they didn't respond at all. This is clearly the symptom of a person dying. For a time, the other archers also felt that they were in danger. The snipers in the dark continued to shoot, but in front of the archers who were on guard, they were no longer as accurate as before. Everyone was a long-range fighter, and they had a natural sense of danger. After several archers dodged the bullets, they finally found that the situation was not right. Not good. There are assassins in the dark, and they are very likely to be using weapons similar to firearms. After the captain of the archers dodged a fatal shot, he saw a small hole in the place where he was originally standing and immediately said with a nervous face, "Hide, hide in a safe place." The captain of the team finally spoke, and more than 100 archers hurriedly dodged in all directions, each looking for a safe place. "We've been discovered, let's just rush in," Captain Baez was said with some reluctance. But archers were archers, and that kind of perception of danger was innate. He didn't expect to be able to eliminate all of them. As long as they could scare them or even make them retreat, they would be able to save most of the ninjas. Under the protection of the Wolf Fang members, the snipers of the Ghost Shadow continued to approach the courtyard, and from time to time, they would fire a shot. Most of them couldn't hit anyone, but the deterrent effect was still very effective. After the silencer was removed, when the gunshots began to sound from time to time, the archers began to retreat. The sudden appearance of the Ghost Shadow and Wolf Fang members also caught the samurai by surprise. The cunning Yamaguchi Fukuda saw more and more mysterious people appear, and after taking the lives of several of his samurai from a distance, he knew that this was not a place to stay for long. Looking at Matsumoto Kazuma, who was still waving his sword and overdrawing his life, Yamaguchi Fukuda finally didn't take the risk to make a move. In his eyes, Matsumoto Kazuma had lost so much blood, even if no one did anything to him, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. So why take the risk? He immediately waved his hand and led the samurai to retreat, leaving this mess to Tai Hu and Baizwa who were rushing here. The samurai and the archers retreated very quickly, and the ninja courtyard quickly returned to its previous tranquility. The only difference was that this place was filled with the smell of blood. Even Tai Hu and Baizwa, who were accustomed to this kind of scene, couldn't help but sniffle when they arrived. "Okay, hurry up and clean up the battlefield, and bring back those who are still breathing for treatment." In a very short time, Tai Hu adapted to the smell here, and then he began to issue orders. Less than 100 ninjas, including Matsumoto Kazuma, were either supported by their companions or directly on the prepared stretchers, and were moved out of the courtyard. The main force of the 5-star army was still on the way to Ping and Beijing, and they met Tai Hu and the others. Yang Chendong also had the opportunity to personally see Matsumoto Kazuma, who was lying on the stretcher with a pale face. Chapter 1097. As soon as they saw Yang Chendong, Chuishi and Yui Suzuki knelt on the ground. They had already heard from Tai Hu and Baizwa that this kind of person who needed treatment due to excessive bleeding could only be treated by the 6th young master and his designated medical team. Although they didn't know what method would be used, they knew that it would cost a lot. The ninjas weren't completely accepted by the 5-star army yet, and they didn't know if the 6th young master would care about them or not. At this moment, they could only kneel and beg for mercy, hoping that Bugnam of Gojoseon would help. Their request was naturally accepted. Since Yang Chendong was determined to subdue the ninjas for his own use, how could he watch something happen to Matsumoto Kazuma, a core member of the ninjas? Come, send him to the field hospital, tell them what I said, no matter the cost, they must save him. The first Longwei's Captain Chiu V hurriedly nodded and led his men to take over the stretcher. Chuishi and Yui Suzuki were left behind. They looked at Yang Chendong with gratitude and knelt on the ground again. The person was sent away for treatment, but most of the ninjas didn't think that Matsumoto Kazuma could be saved. They saw with their own eyes how much blood was flowing out of his body, and how pale and ugly his complexion was. Under their old thinking, they believed that a person's blood was limited. Since so much had been lost, no matter what methods they used, they would not be able to reverse the situation. Didn't they hear Bugnam of Gojoseon say that they must do their best to save him? Didn't he say that he would definitely be cured? There were a lot of ninjas who thought this, and the number was not small. When Chuishi heard these words, he couldn't help but stare back angrily. You have to believe in Bugnam of Gojoseon, and you have to believe that Kun Matsumoto has the strongest will in the world. He will definitely be able to survive. Although he said this, in fact, Chuishi didn't believe that Matsumoto Kazuma would really be fine. He was just doing his best and leaving the rest to fate. For the whole afternoon, nearly 100 ninjas rested in several large tents arranged for them. They were all extremely quiet. This was related to the boring life they had since childhood, and they were also worried about Matsumoto Kazuma's health. For a long time, Matsumoto Kazuma was their leader. No matter what happened, everyone was used to listening to his orders. Now that there was a problem, it was no wonder that everyone was so sad. Some people didn't even know how to face the future. Time passed little by little, the sky gradually darkened, and finally there was movement outside the big tent. Ninja's perception is very strong. As soon as they heard footsteps coming, they walked out of the big tent without anyone calling them. With the help of the torches next to the barracks, they saw that the person who came was a seemingly high-level guard who followed Bugnam of Gojoseon during the day. The person who came was tall and his voice was like thunder. After noticing that all the ninjas, even some of the wounded who were covered with gauze, involuntarily walked out of the big tent, he nodded with satisfaction. This saved him the trouble of notifying them one by one. Hello everyone, my name is Beta Persei. I am Bugnam of Gojoseon's personal guard. I am here on behalf of Bugnam of Gojoseon to inform you that Matsumoto Kazuma has passed the critical period and is fine. But really? After a moment, the ninjas who reacted suddenly became lively. Many of them had a look of joy on their faces, and some of them showed a look of disbelief. For example, Blow Ishida was one of them. Beta Persei-kun, is Kun Matsumoto really okay? Yes. Beta Persei replied with a very positive tone. Then can we go and see him? Yui Suzuki asked anxiously. Yes, but after all, his body hasn't fully recovered, so we can't send too many people at once. You can send 2 representatives to see him first. Beta Persei also knew that if he didn't let people see him, not many people would believe him. The 2 representatives were naturally Blow Ishida and Suzuki Yu. They represented nearly 100 ninjas and followed Beta Persei to the temporary battlefield hospital. There, they saw Matsumoto Kazuma lying on the bed. His face had recovered a lot of color, but he could only lie down. Kun Matsumoto. Blow Ishida and Suzuki Yu almost cried at the same time, and said with a somewhat choked voice. You're here. After seeing his 2 companions, Matsumoto Kazuma forced a smile, and then wanted to sit up on the bed, but he inadvertently pulled the wound on his abdomen that was just stitched, and he couldn't help but grin. All of this was seen by Blow Ishida and Suzuki Yu, and they quickly stepped forward to help him. Looking at all of this, Beta Persei knew that it was time for him to leave. He said that the visiting time can't be too long, and the patient still needs to rest. Then he left first. When only Matsumoto Kazuma and the other 2 were left in the tent, it suddenly became very quiet. The 3 of them closed their eyes and did the same thing. This wasn't praying, but sensing. They were sensing the surrounding environment to decide if they could talk about something here. Soon, the 3 of them opened their eyes and nodded to each other. After ensuring that the environment was safe, Matsumoto Kazuma, who was lying on the bed, was the first to ask, "Why am I here? Why are you here?" Because of the lag in the news, Matsumoto Kazuma still didn't know that the three of them failed their mission and were captured by Yang Chendong and were used as an excuse to deal with the Supreme Generalissimo. Right now, Matsumoto Kazuma's mind was still stuck in the scene where he fought with the samurai. Kun Matsumoto, the situation is like this. Blow Ishida, who was quite eloquent, told him how the three of them failed their mission and were captured, and how they reached an agreement with Yang Chendong. Finally, they went to the ninja compound with the elites of the 5-star army to rescue the three of them. Matsumoto Kazuma listened carefully at first, but when he heard that the three of them were captured, he was surprised. When he heard that he reached an agreement with Bugnam of Gojoseon, he was worried that they would be used. After hearing everything, he finally understood why the Supreme Generalissimo sent Yamaguchi Fukada to attack him with elite samurai and 200 sharpshooters. Matsumoto Kazuma was in charge of the external affairs of the ninja compound, so his understanding of the human heart was much better than Blow Ishida and Yui Suzuki. Yang Chendong's bet was a conspiracy in his eyes, and it was proven that all of this was beneficial to the development of the 5-star army. Obviously, Matsumoto Kazuma knew everything, but he couldn't say anything. Blame them? He didn't kill the captives, but he respected them and gave them a chance to choose. That was already very benevolent. At least from Matsumoto Kazuma's point of view, if he was in their shoes, he wouldn't let the person who tried to assassinate him live. Also, Yang Chendong only made a simple plan, and the one who really fell for it was the Supreme Generalissimo. If he didn't think of himself as a cautious person, if he trusted him a little more, this kind of fratricide wouldn't have happened. From this matter, it can be seen that everyone didn't trust each other. Under such a foundation, even if the fratricide didn't happen today, it might happen in the future. With a long sigh, Matsumoto Kazuma knew that he lost, and lost completely. Now that the other party saved his life and gave him a new lease of life, he didn't seem to have any choice in the future. One was his old boss, who wanted to kill him. The other was his new boss, who not only saved his life, but also gave him a place to live and a new hope. What choice to make? He should know how to make a decision. But before that, he still hoped to know more about Bugnam of Gojoseon, so that he can get more benefits for himself in the future. Blow Ishida, Suzuki-kun, you've all seen Bugnam of Gojoseon. Tell me about your impression and understanding of him. In the main tent 2 miles away, Beta Persei stood in front of Yang Chendong and handed over the task. Then he asked with a puzzled look, "Young master, why don't you let me stay and listen to what they say? I'm sure I won't be discovered by them." "Oh, do you think that ninja's perception is just for show? I can guarantee that before you get close to the big tent, you will be discovered," Yang Chendong said with a smile. Ninjas are best at sneaky assassinations. The feeling that they can appear at any time is very annoying, making people unable to guard against them. The reason is their perception of the environment. It is precisely because of this instinct that they can avoid all kinds of warnings and appear next to the target without making a sound. Being looked down upon by the young master, Beta Persei was a little unconvinced. "Young master, so we just let them be? What if they don't abide by the rules and don't do it according to the bet and want to leave or assassinate you again?" "They won't." Yang Chendong's answer was firm. "In this world, I'm afraid that there are few people who know more about the ninja industry than him. It is precisely because they do what they say, because of this simplicity, that they can persist in training in a boring environment and thus become a terrifying existence. On the contrary, if they have other ideas in their hearts and there are too many conspiracy elements, then they won't have their current achievements." Because of this understanding, Yang Chendong believes that the date of his conversation with Matsumoto Kazuma is not far away. Early the next morning, as soon as Yang Chendong had breakfast, Captain Chio-vi came to the main tent and reported to him that Matsumoto Kazuma wanted to meet. "Is it that urgent?" Yang Chendong smiled after listening, then said to Chio-vi, "Let's go, accompany me to patrol inside and outside the barracks." Chapter 1098. Yang Chendong wanted to see Matsumoto Kazuma, but he couldn't be in a hurry. "I can't just go and see you when you want to see me. Wouldn't that be too tasteless?" He was now the great Ming Prince. How high was his status? How could anyone see him just because they wanted to? Besides, at this time, the appropriate control will also play a positive role in conquering the ninja team, so why not? Yang Chendong was not in a hurry, but the one who was anxious was Matsumoto Kazuma. Seeing that it was already noon, and he had even finished eating lunch, but he still didn't see Yang Chendong's figure. He became somewhat anxious. Originally, he was anxious to see Yang Chendong because he wanted to express his attitude. That was, he was willing to accept his loss. Even if he wasn't present when the bet was made, he was still willing to accept everything. But as compensation, he also had to put forward some conditions to fight for more benefits for the ninja team. Matsumoto Kazuma was very confident that Yang Chendong would agree to some of his conditions. This could be seen from the fact that the other party didn't kill the 3 ninjas under the rock. Instead, he arranged for elite forces. Now, he even put in a lot of effort to save him. Since the other party valued him so much, if he didn't take the opportunity to put forward some conditions, wouldn't it be a waste of this opportunity? But after not seeing Yang Chendong's figure for a long time, his originally confident heart became somewhat uncertain. That is ninja really that important? At least for the leader of the 5-star army, the Ming dynasty's Bugnam of Gojoseon, is it really that important? Until the afternoon passed, Matsumoto Kazuma's original confidence was worn down by more than half. When it was time to eat dinner, there was still no news. He even began to doubt his own importance. It was also at this time that dense footsteps came from outside the big tent. Then the curtain of the big tent opened from the outside. A tall figure took the lead to enter, bringing a lot of pressure to Matsumoto Kazuma. The first to enter was Beta Persei. He first looked around, then looked at Matsumoto Kazuma lying on the bed. After he didn't find anything unusual, he nodded with satisfaction. He turned around and respectfully said, "Young master, everything is normal." After his voice fell, Yang Chendong appeared in front of Matsumoto Kazuma with a confident smile. Although he has heard about him for a long time, this is the first time he saw King Wunan of Daemyeong. Matsumoto Kazuma carefully observed the other party and found that the other party has a trace of a superior aura. The most important thing is that the confidence in his body seems to be able to infect others, giving people a sense of omnipotence. "Matsumoto, don't you know how to kneel when you see Bugnam of Gojoseon?" Beta Persei noticed that this person only stared at the young master at this moment and didn't do anything else. He suddenly shouted angrily, and this shout also pulled the other party's thoughts back to reality. Matsumoto Kazuma greets Bugnam of Gojoseon. As he spoke, he wanted to get out of bed and salute. "Forget it, you still have injuries on your body, just sit and talk." Yang Chendong casually waved his arm, but it was this movement that seemed to have some kind of magical power, making Matsumoto Kazuma, who wanted to get up, stop and involuntarily say, "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me. I saved you because I don't want to see a talent fall. Also, this king's time is limited. I only have the time for an incense stick to burn to listen to you. I have other military affairs to attend to in a while." Yang Chendong sat down in front of the chair that Beta Persei had brought over. Chiu Vi behind him also took out an incense stick, lit it and stuck it in the ground, using facts to tell some people that they really only had the time for an incense stick to burn. Such anxiety and such an attitude. For a moment, Matsumoto Kazuma, who had a stomach full of words, suddenly didn't know what to say. He wanted to say too much, and it was far from being able to express clearly in an incense stick's time. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to play a very important role. If he can't explain his importance, then how can he make conditions? After waiting for a whole day, Matsumoto Kazuma really thought that Yang Chendong was very busy. If he missed today's negotiation, who knows when the next negotiation will be? He and his ninjas can't just wait like this. "I have to give in." The facts made Matsumoto Kazuma quickly make a decision. Since time is limited, he can only seize the time to make demands. In order to reach an agreement in a limited time, he has to constantly give in and give up benefits. Bugnam of Gojoseon, Chuishiki-kun and Suzuki-kun said that you are willing to support the development and growth of our ninja training team, right? With a hint of probing tone, he said. Although this was originally a fact, he had seen many people who reneged on their debts, not to mention that if Yang Chendong admitted it, then it would be a large expenditure of 5 million silver coins. That's right. Matsumoto Kazuma still wanted to probe, but Yang Chendong had already openly admitted it. After getting an accurate answer, Matsumoto Kazuma was very happy in his heart. Once there is an injection of 5 million silver coins, it is equivalent to having a great financial power. Whether it is high-intensity training or recruiting suitable seedlings, it will not be a problem. But just as this smile hung on his face, Yang Chendong also opened his mouth and said, "The promised 5 million silver coins will not be given to you all at once. In the beginning, I will give you 1 million silver coins, and then it will be paid in 5 batches within 3 years. During this period, if you complete the task given by this king, there will be additional rewards, but if the task is not completed well, or if you are disobedient, then your silver coins will be deducted. Do you agree?" He didn't expect there to be such an additional condition, but Chuishiki-kun didn't say anything before. After being stunned for a moment, Matsumoto Kazuma felt relieved. Now he was at the chopping block, and he was the meat on the chopping block. What should he do? Shouldn't it be up to him? At least he didn't deny the 5 million silver coins. This result already made him very satisfied. The time it takes for a stick of incense to burn quickly passed. Yang Chendong did as he said and got up to leave, leaving Matsumoto Kazuma alone on the bed. He was still thinking about what Yang Chendong had said. Arrange a suitable training ground, provide food and gold. Of course, the food will be converted into silver coins and deducted from the 5 million silver coins. In addition, when there is a task to be given, the ninja team must carry it out to the letter. If they succeed, there will be rewards, and if they fail, there will be punishment. All of this was different from what Matsumoto Kazuma had imagined. He wanted to fight for a year without missions to restore the ninja team's strength, but now it seems that he didn't have the opportunity to raise the conditions, and he didn't have the ability to do so. Fortunately, Yang Chendong did what he said. Before he left hundreds of banknotes, which added up to exactly 1 million silver coins. Holding these in his hands, Matsumoto Kazuma felt a sense of security in his heart. Yang Chendong put aside the matter of the ninja team. He had done what he should do, and the next development would depend on the ability of the other party. Now his main energy was focused on conquering Ping and Beijing. He wanted to take advantage of the time when Ashikaga Yoshimasa was focusing on conquering the northern land road. Ping and Beijing was not only a simple region, it was also the capital of the Japanese Empire and the political and economic center of the country. Of course, at this time, the Japanese Empire didn't have its own unique culture. Once this place was conquered, it would represent the orthodoxy in a way. In addition, Junko was the princess of the Japanese Empire. When the time came, there would be a lot of people responding to her call, and it would be much easier to deal with Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was being thought of, did not look good. Standing in front of him was Yamaguchi Fukada, whose face was full of shame. This time, he didn't complete the task well, and didn't bring back Matsumoto Kazuma's body. Afraid of being punished, he kept his head down after entering the room, and didn't dare to raise it again. "Get out 20 strokes of the cane." A cold voice came out of Ashikaga Yoshimasa's mouth. Yamaguchi Fukada breathed a sigh of relief in his heart and turned to receive his punishment without saying a word. He knew the general's temper. If things went wrong, it was normal for him to be beheaded. This time, 20 strokes of the cane was the lowest punishment. This was not because Ashikaga Yoshimasa had a good temper, but because he was in need of manpower, especially since the ninja team could no longer be used, and the samurai team was abandoned, the number of cards in his hand would only decrease. Yamaguchi Fukada had already rolled out, but Yoshimasa's face still didn't look too good. Originally, he wanted to capture Matsumoto Fujina alive, or at least get his body, and then hand it over to the Pentastar army to get himself out of this matter. But now, it seemed that this trump card was gone. He slowly raised his head and fell on the other person in the room. Nin Shijuin, without Matsumoto Kazuma, the negotiation won't be a big problem, right? Nin Shijuin was sitting in the room. When he learned that the five-star army suddenly tore up the agreement and invaded Ping and Beijing, he urgently summoned this person, and wanted to reopen the negotiation and stabilize the five-star army first. But who would have thought that the bargaining chip in his hand was gone, and all hope could only be placed on Nin Shijuan's silver tongue. Nin Shijuan, who was asked this question, frowned first. At this moment he was a little angry in his heart. He had spent a lot of effort to suppress the five-star army through negotiations. He had even paid the price of the entire Shanyang path for this. But now, everything was destroyed because of the general's actions. Since he was the one who destroyed the negotiation first, it was no wonder that the five-star army suddenly attacked. Under the current situation, it was very difficult to stop the five-star army. Ashikaga Yoshimasa did not immediately answer this question. He knew that Nin Shijuan had an idea, so he immediately said, "Yamaguchi-kun just said that Matsumoto Kazuma lost too much blood, and I'm afraid that he is already dead. It shouldn't be too difficult to put all the blame on a dead person." Chapter 1099. Sigh. Nin Shidoxiu sighed in his heart. He knew that he couldn't avoid this anymore, so he finally said, "If Matsumoto Kazuma is really dead, then this matter can be discussed, but we still have to pay a price. If there are no benefits, then I'm afraid that the five-star army won't be able to negotiate." "They want benefits? Just give it to them." Ashikaga Yoshimasa became excited. Then he strode to the map on the side. After pondering for a moment, he pointed at the Shanin Road area and said, "Give this area to the five-star army. This kind of benefit should be able to stop their army from advancing." "What? Give the entire Shanin Road to them?" This time, it was Nin Shidoxiu's turn to be shocked. It must be known that in the entire Japanese Empire, there were only 7 districts other than Ping and Beijing. They already gave one to them before, and the five-star army took down another one. Now that they were giving another one, didn't that mean that they had already taken over half of the Japanese Empire's land? Looking at Nin Shidoxiu's shocked expression, Ashikaga Yoshimasa smiled with satisfaction. This was the effect he wanted. Presumably, King Wenan of Daimyong would be as shocked as Nin Shidoxiu was right now. "Yes, give it to them." "Hee, I'm generous, right?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa laughed. He didn't care about Nin Shidoxiu's shock at all. Very quickly, he gave a reasonable explanation. "Right now, our main goal is to destroy the Flatwell field. As long as he dies, there will be no resistance in the country. At that time, it will be time for us to go back and deal with the five-star army. Before that, we need peace. Besides, is the Shanin Road really that easy to take? There are dozens of big and small forces there. There are more than 200,000 soldiers there than the five-star army. If they want to take it down, it won't be something that can be done overnight." Nin Shidoxiu finally understood what the great general meant. He let out a sigh of relief and nodded at the same time. He was really afraid that the great general was afraid of the five-star army and wanted to give up all the benefits. Since he already had a plan, he only needed to execute it. With such a big dish like the Shanin path in front of him, he believed that no one would be able to resist the temptation. "All right. Please rest assured, great general. Leave everything to me." 3 days later, Nin Shidoxiu arrived at the five-star army's tent. This was the second time he came here, so he was very familiar with the place. When he saw Yang Chendong, he first saluted, then explained, and finally threw out the bait. Regarding the assassination, Nin Shidoxiu naturally said that all of this was the personal behavior of the ninjas. He and the great general didn't know about it, but in any case, this incident caused losses and shock to the Bugnam of Gojoseon. As compensation, and to show the friendly relationship between the two sides, Nin Shidoxiu expressed on behalf of the great general that he was willing to give up the Shanin Road to the five-star army as compensation. Another large area of the Shanin Road was given to him just like that. Yang Chendong felt a little surprised. But then he understood that this wasn't giving him benefits, it was clearly setting a trap for him. Does he really think that he is a 3-year-old child who can be easily fooled? After Nin Shidoxiu finished speaking, he kept staring at Yang Chendong. He wanted to see what his first reaction would be to make the most correct judgment. In order not to let the other party down, Yang Chendong deliberately pretended to be very interested and greedy. There was even a hint of eagerness in his voice. Is the great general really willing to give the Shanin Road to the 5-star army? Of course, the great general values the friendship between the Bugnam of Gojoseon. Seeing that Yang Chendong seemed to have fallen into his trap, Ningxi Duoxiu was happy in his heart, and at the same time, he replied with a very positive tone. Well, thank you very much, great general, but I don't know if this matter can be announced to the world. This can also express the deep friendship between us and the great general. Yang Chendong smiled and made a small request. Since he was going to put on a show, of course, he had to go all the way. Ningxi Duoxiu thought that Yang Chendong had fallen into his trap, so he didn't suspect anything and simply agreed. He also said that he would send the document personally written by the great general to the 5-star army's barracks in 7 days at the latest. It was just a handwritten document, but it actually needed 7 days. Ningxi Duoxiu's intention to use this opportunity to stall for time was obvious. But Yang Chendong didn't have the intention to expose him. He also needed time to make some preparations. Ningxi Duoxiu left very satisfied. He didn't know that only half a day after he left, a small team walked out of the 5-star army. They left the barracks and went straight in the direction of the Shanin Road. The person leading the team was the director of the intelligence bureau in the Japanese Empire. Guanxing was following Yang Chendong's orders. This time, he was going to see the Japanese Empire's Shanin Road's General Uehara Toda. As the largest military force in the Shanin Road, Uehara Toda had 80,000 soldiers. Such a force could be considered an extremely powerful force even among the ranks of generals. Based on his understanding of the Shanin Road's terrain and environment, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was the local snake. Normally, Uehara Toda and the great general Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't interfere with each other's business. When it came to some big matters, the two sides would cooperate to a limited extent. It was precisely because the great general didn't see him as an enemy that he had to deal with immediately that Uehara Toda's days were really carefree. No matter how the Japanese Empire's civil war was, even if Baiming and Bugnam of Gojoseon wanted to get a share of the pie, he still wasn't worried at all. He just sat there and watched the situation change as if he had nothing to do with it. In a war, very few people could really stay out of it. Uehara Toda also knew that he had to make a move, but when to choose the right time and how to do it to maximize the benefits, this was what he was looking for. To sum it up, he was waiting for the right price. Sure enough, Uehara Toda, who hadn't made a move until now, would receive all kinds of gifts from the great general from time to time. Gold, silver, treasures, beautiful women, and at the same time, it was also to appease him, hoping that he wouldn't use this opportunity to cause trouble. He fully understood Ashikaga Yoshimasa's intentions. This Uehara Toda really did things according to the rules. The civil war had been going on for almost half a year, but he hadn't sent a single soldier to the battlefield. He was very good at being a spectator, watching the situation unfold. On this day, Uehara Toda, who was drinking and enjoying a rare peaceful time in his great general's residence, welcomed a special guest, the 5-star army's messenger Guanxing. Regarding the 5-star army, Uehara Toda's feelings were very conflicted. The reason he was able to obtain all kinds of benefits from the current chaotic situation was because of the 5-star army's sudden intervention. From this point of view, he should thank them. But on the other hand, the 5-star army was still an outsider, and no matter how the Japanese Empire fought, it was still meat in the pot. As a great general of the Japanese Empire, of course, he didn't want to see other people come to his country and take advantage of it. With this kind of love and hate, Uehara Toda hesitated for a moment. Thinking about how powerful the 5-star army was, especially their firearms, he finally decided to meet the other party. If the other party really had a request, as long as it wasn't too excessive, he wouldn't mind agreeing. It was better than provoking a powerful opponent for no reason. In the main hall, Uehara Toda received Guanxing. As soon as they met, he had a smile on his face and showed a very warm appearance. While inviting Guanxing to sit down, he also personally poured a cup of sake for him. This kind of reception, if it was someone else, would really be moved. In Guanxing's eyes, his evaluation of Uehara Toda had to be a bit higher. A man who knew when to bow and submit wasn't afraid of villains, but he was afraid of hypocrites. This person will probably be a stumbling block on the path of the 5-star army in the future. Guan Xing, who made a preliminary impression in his heart, smiled and took the sake. His mouth was full of thanks, and the guest and the host gave a very harmonious feeling for a while. After drinking several cups of sake, the relationship between the two sides seemed to be a lot closer, and Guan Xing finally talked about business. And when he opened his mouth, he exploded with a bomb. Uehara Toda, do you know that a disaster is about to befall you? Uehara Toda, who was also observing Guan Xing and guessing the purpose of the other party's visit, heard this, and his face froze. But soon, he chuckled and said, "Esteemed envoy, aren't you being a little alarmist? How could there be an imminent disaster?" "What? Doesn't the general know?" Guan Xing, who had already thought of all kinds of possible responses, pretended to be surprised and asked with a confident look. "Know what?" Uehara Toda, who was completely driven by the rhythm, had to ask aloud. "It seems that the general really doesn't know. Sai, seeing that we are chatting so well, then I will tell the general. It won't be long before the Yamen Road will be owned by the 5-star army. At that time, I am afraid that the general will lose everything he has." As if he was stating a fact, Guan Xing shook his head as he spoke. Uehara Toda's face was a bit unfriendly, and he stared at Guan Xing and said, "What? Does the 5-star army want to send troops to occupy the Yamen Road?" "Occupy? What do you mean by that?" Guan Xing asked with a puzzled expression. "What? Didn't you say that this place will soon be owned by the 5-star army? Then what are you doing if you don't want to occupy it?" "If that's the case and you're here to declare war, then I'll accept it. However, the 80,000 troops under my command and the hundreds of thousands of people from other forces are not to be trifled with. The Shanin Road belongs to us Neon people, and no one else is allowed to touch it." When he said the last sentence, Uehara Toda showed a domineering side, as if he was not afraid of war, nor was he afraid of the 5-star army. Uehara Toda's fearless performance was seen by Guan Xing. This was the result he had expected, so he exclaimed, "What does the general mean? The 5-star army never meant to be the general's enemy. All of this is because the great general Ashikaga Yoshimasa promised our Bugnam of Gojoseon." Chapter 1100. Uehara Toda, who was about to continue to fight head-on and show his strong side to make the 5-star army fear him, suddenly heard Guan Xing's words. He was stunned for a moment, then he said with a confused expression, "Wait, what did you say just now? You said that everything was the Grand General's idea?" It's like this." Guan Xing felt that the time was right, so he told Uehara Toda all the promises that Ninjashi Toda made after meeting Bugnam of Gojoseon. In the end, he said, "In a few days, the Grand General's handwritten document will be sent to Bugnam of Gojoseon. When the time comes, the Grand General will be able to see whether it's real or not. By the way, the Grand General's handwriting, I'm sure the Grand General can recognize it." These days, the two sides have been communicating a lot, and Uehara Toda certainly recognized Ashikaga Yoshimasa's handwriting. However, he did not care about these details. He was thinking about why the Grand General would betray him. Could it be that the Grand General wanted to sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight like him? Uehara Toda's mind was in a mess. After Ninjashi Toda returned to the Hokuriku Road and met with Ashikaga Yoshimasa, she told him about her meeting with Yang Chendong. "Grand General, as you expected, Bugnam of Gojoseon was very tempted. This pie is really big. Haha." At this moment, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was in a very good mood. He laughed and said, "There are no eternal enemies, and there are no eternal friends. Only interests are eternal. As long as Bugnam of Gojoseon is still a person, it's impossible for him not to be tempted. This is all within my expectations." Yes, the Grand General is mighty. Ninjashi Toda took the opportunity to flatter him. Good. You've done a good job. I'll reward you handsomely. However, there's one more thing I need you to do." Ashikaga Yoshimasa stopped laughing and spoke in a serious tone. "Please tell me, Grand General." Ninjashi Toda said with admiration. Ashikaga Yoshimasa said, "I'll write a letter." You can send it to the 5-star Army's camp. At the same time, I'll also write a letter to Uehara Toda. I'll have to trouble you to make the trip personally. Ashikaga Yoshimasa was able to become the most powerful official in the Japanese Empire. He was even able to control the royal family. He was not only good at war, he was also good at scheming. Since the 5-star army had been ignited, the next step was to add fuel to the fire of the Japanese army in the Shanin Road. He didn't want the 5-star army to progress too smoothly. What he wanted to see was a scene where the two sides were entangled and mutually damaged. If he pointed the 5-star army's forces at the Shanin area and reminded Uehara Toda to be prepared, there was a high possibility that the 5-star army would be entangled in a battle. Once he dealt with the Flatwell Field, which was the biggest opposition to him, it would be time for him to turn around and work with Uehara Toda to deal with the 5-star army. To deal with foreign aggression, he must first deal with internal problems. This was also Ashikaga Yoshimasa's idea. As long as he destroyed the Flatwell Field and drove away the 5-star army, it would be time for him to deal with Uehara Toda and the others. At that time, he would become the emperor of the Japanese Empire. Everyone knew how to calculate, but it was obvious that Ashikaga Yoshimasa was not as good as Yang Qindong. His self-proclaimed masterpiece had long been seen through by others. Waiting for the letter that promised to give the Shanin area to the 5-star army, Yang Qindong arranged for Longwei's second captain, Dao Xiao, to lead a group of elites to the north. Inside the shogun's mansion, Nishitoshi also brought the second letter from the shogun and met the owner of the mansion, Uehara Toda. He was still very enthusiastic as he received Ningshi Dueshio's group. Although he had Guanhang's reminder, Uehara Toda did not intend to reject the guests before everything was clear. He wanted to stay out of it. As for how the 5-star army and the shogun would fight, let them do as they pleased as long as they did not drag him into it. Nishitoshi did not know that the messenger of the 5-star army had already rushed over, and did not know that Uehara Toda already knew everything. He even took out the general's handwritten letter as if they were idiots. Then, with a face full of hatred, he talked about how domineering the 5-star army was. He also said that the general was focusing all his efforts on dealing with Hirai Ida, so he really didn't have the energy to stop the 5-star army. However, his heart was on General Uehara's side, and as long as they held off the 5-star army for a while, the general would return and help him deal with the 5-star army once he finished his work. If he did not hear Guanhang's words, these words would be very believable. But after knowing everything, Uehara Toda would not be so easily fooled. The 5-star army is indeed very overbearing. I am willing to listen to the shogun's orders and stall them here. But what? Seeing that they had succeeded, Nishitoshi asked in a very good mood. But before the army moves, the supplies have to go first. You have to give me some time to prepare. Uehara Toda purposely showed the look of a businessman. He was trying to bargain and gain some benefits for himself. Nishitoshi thought that he had seen through everything. As an opponent who would become his opponent sooner or later, he could not give him any benefits. He believed that once the 5-star army really came, Uehara Toda would know what to do without him giving anything. So he did not make any promises and instead acted as if he did not understand, saying that he would give Uehara Toda a few days to prepare before the battle. Nishitoshi was sent to the inn to rest, leaving Uehara Toda with a face full of anger. The other party did not even want to give him any money. Was he really going to commit suicide? At this moment, he was already leaning towards Guanhang's words. A day later, Dao Xiao came. Along with him was the document that Ashikaga Yoshimasa had taken the initiative to assign Shanin Road to the 5-star army. Guanhang was very happy when he saw this document. With this, Uehara Toda will not know what to do. How about this? I will go see him tomorrow morning. Captain Dao, you have been busy for a long time, so you should rest first. No need, we still have a mission. Where is Nishitoshi staying? Dao Xiao said very energetically, without the slightest bit of fatigue from the long journey. Daimon Inn. Where Nishitoshi stayed. To be exact, this was Uehara Toda's property. Whenever a friend came, he would arrange for them to stay here. In Uehara Toda's territory, and in his inn, Nishitoshi never thought that he would be in any danger here. But when a short knife was placed in front of his neck, he woke up from his dream. He instinctively thought that Uehara Toda wanted to deal with him, so he immediately begged for mercy in Japanese. He also said that he had a lot of money, and as long as he could spare his life, he was willing to take it all out. If it was a normal person who was looking for money, he might have a chance when faced with these words. Unfortunately, he was facing Dao Xiao, so everything was a different story. As the second captain of Longwei, Dao Xiao estimated that Qiuyang Chendong's people were treated well, and many people could only look up to him. Yang Chendong used people based on their ability, and at the same time he valued loyalty even more. If a person's character was not good, then no matter how capable they were, they would not enter his eyes. In terms of using people, Yang Chendong was very clear that words alone were not enough to have an absolute effect. They also needed to have a guarantee of living conditions. Therefore, every Longwei person's monthly salary was high enough to support a family of 50 people. In his own words, if you want people to work for you, how can you be stingy when it comes to money? This was also why people with ability were sharpening their brains to enter Longwei. Not only did it give them face, but it also gave them money. Dao Xiao was one of the people who enjoyed this kind of treatment, and he could be considered one of the people who benefited. Hearing Nishitoshi's words, he, who had learned some Japanese, said impatiently, "Shut up, or I'll kill you right now." I'll shut up. Nishitoshi did not dare to speak. He could feel that the black-clothed man in front of him was full of murderous intent. What he said was not to scare him, but he really did not know how many people he had killed to give others such a feeling. The world quieted down, and Dao Xiao finally continued with his work. To tell you the truth, as long as you listen to me, I won't kill you. Now, write a letter and copy the content. He took out a letter and threw it in front of Nishitoshi, who was kneeling on the ground. Hearing that he could not die, Nishitoshi's head nodded like a chicken eating food. Then, he took out the letter, and after reading it, his face turned ugly. The content of the letter was not complicated. In his tone, he said that Uehara Toda had reached an agreement with the 5-star army, and that they were ready to attack the great general together. After reading the content, Nishitoshi was sure that the black-clothed man in front of him was not an ordinary bandit. He was not here for money, but for a purpose. Slowly raising his head, Nishitoshi wanted to ask about the identity of the black-clothed man, but before he could open his mouth, pain spread through his whole body. Then, blood flowed down his neck, and a fleshy ear appeared in Dao Xiao's hand. Pa! A broken ear was thrown in front of Nishitoshi, who wanted to scream but did not dare. He finally saw Dao Xiao's ruthless side, and he knew that everything just now was not a joke. He immediately lowered his head and looked for a pen and paper. Ningxi Duoxiu was very cooperative. In order to survive, he carefully read the letter after copying it. After making sure that there were no mistakes, he presented the letter to Dao Xiao with both hands with a flattering look on his face, as if he was trying to suck up to Dao Xiao. Logically speaking, he was also a talent. He had a glib tongue and could speak directly to people's hearts, which was why he was used by Ashikaga Yoshimasa. However, he was only good at talking. Although he had practiced martial arts before, it was not worth mentioning in front of Dao Xiao. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as a scholar meeting a soldier. Chapter 1101. Everyone only had one life, and Nishitoshi didn't dare to gamble, nor did he dare to play any tricks. All he could do was to cooperate and gamble on the hope of survival. Obviously, he lost the gamble. Dao Xiao's mission was to force Nishitoshi to write the letter, and then kill him. This was an order from Yang Chendong himself, and all he had to do was to carry it out 100%. After receiving the letter and verifying that there was no mistake, he thrust the dagger forward and stabbed it into the heart made of flesh and blood. Ningxi Duoxiu was dead. Nishitoshi was dead. The body was found the next morning by a subordinate who came to deliver food to the room. The matter was quickly reported to Uehara Toda in the general's residence. But at this moment, General Uehara was meeting with Guanxing, and the letter in his hand was written by the Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa himself. It said that he took the initiative to give the Hokuriku to the 5-star army. After confirming that it was written by Ashikaga Yoshimasa himself, Uehara Toda couldn't help but curse angrily, "Bastard." This was equivalent to him being betrayed and becoming a part of the transaction. He always thought that he was someone important, but now it seemed that the Supreme General didn't even care about the 80,000 soldiers under his command. It could be imagined that once the 5-star army was gone, the Supreme General would turn around and lead the army to destroy him. There was some heartache. The feeling of not being valued greatly hit Uehara Toda's self-confidence, and it also inspired him to have a greater idea of success. Guan Xing, who was sitting across from him, spoke at the right time. "General Uehara, don't be too angry. In the end, people still need to rely on their strength to speak. If you don't have strength, you'll only harm yourself." "What? Do you want to laugh at this general?" Uehara Toda, who was in a bad mood, said coldly, and there was even a trace of murderous aura around him. "So what if you're the messenger of the 5-star army? This is the Hokuriku, my headquarters. No one can act tough in front of me." The murderous aura was faintly discernible, but Guan Xing didn't seem to feel it. He still chuckled and said, "General, you misunderstand. Since I'm here, of course I won't harm you. On the contrary, I'm here to give you a gift." "Gift? What gift?" Uehara Toda's face had a trace of confusion, and looking closely, there was a trace of vigilance. There had to be something fishy going on. He didn't believe that the 5-star army, who had no relation to him, would give him such a big gift. There might be some kind of trap. Guan Xing's next words made him realize that he had been overthinking things. The 5-star army was indeed going to give him a big gift, but he had to fight for it himself. Because according to Guan Xing, his so-called gift was only a way for him to move forward. "General, our Bugnam of Gojoseon said that he doesn't want to get involved in your internal strife. If it wasn't for the fact that Princess Junko has become the 8th madam, our 5-star army wouldn't even want to get involved in your Japanese empire's affairs. All of this is just to give the princess an explanation. Next, they just need to go to Ping in Beijing and take back the palace. The 5-star army's goal will be achieved, and they will stop. And unless someone provokes them, they will turn a blind eye to the internal strife of the Japanese empire." As soon as Guan Xing's words fell, Uehara Toda chuckled. "Emissary, you clearly want to watch us fight among ourselves, so that we can disintegrate without a single soldier. General, you're wrong. What I said just now can be announced to the world in the form of a document. To be honest, if you really want to do something to the general, the 80,000 soldiers in your hands may not be enough." Guan Xing's tone also became a lot more serious. "Negotiations are like this. It's not advisable to blindly use force or soft tactics. Only by using both can you achieve your goal." Being looked down upon again, Uehara Toda's temper rose. He stared fiercely at Guan Xing, and it looked like he would ask someone to kill the person in front of him at any time. But before he could speak, footsteps came from outside the room. A guard walked in without permission with an anxious look on his face. Originally, Uehara Toda wanted to scold his subordinate for not following the rules, but when he saw the anxious look on his face, Uehara Toda knew something was wrong and asked, "What happened?" "General, things are not good." The guard walked forward and told Uehara Toda about Naioi Taksuyu's death in his room. When Uehara Toda received the news, his expression changed again and again. Suddenly, he looked fiercely at Guan Xing and said, "Naioi Taksuyu is dead. Did you send someone to do it?" "This is really bad news, but I really didn't send someone to do it." Guan Xing looked surprised, then spread his hands and didn't admit it. Originally, he didn't give the order, everything was Yang Chendong's idea. Seeing that Guan Xing still didn't want to get involved at this time, Uehara Toda said angrily, "What? Do you really think that I won't dare to kill you if you don't admit it? Let me tell you, this is not the barracks of the 5-star army, this is my general's mansion." "Hee hee. Of course I know that this is the general's mansion, and I know that the general can kill me with a casual order, but will you really do this? Naioi Taksuyu is dead, and the general's side has become your enemy. If something happens to me now, the 5-star army will come. I really want to ask General Uehara, are your 80,000 soldiers really made of iron?" Guan Xing wasn't a pushover. Since things had already come to this point, he had no way out, so he might as well tell the serious consequences. Guan Xing went all out and showed his trump card, as if he wasn't afraid of death. This time, it was Uehara Toda's turn to be stunned. Originally, he wanted to take advantage of both sides, even if he saw the general's handwritten letter. So what? He never expected that the other party would treat him sincerely. The two sides could only use each other. Being used by the other party at least meant that he was valuable. As long as he handled it well, he might be able to get benefits from it and continue to watch the tigers fight on the mountain. But now, Niue Taxiu was dead, and he died in his own territory. Once the general knew about this, would he forgive him? As for Guan Xing, although his current behavior was very infuriating, as long as he still had a bit of intelligence, he wouldn't touch this person. What kind of joke was this? If he really killed Guan Xing, it would be the same as igniting a fire on himself. At that time, it was very likely that the general and the 5-star army would join forces to destroy him first. Don't think that there wasn't such a possibility. In the face of huge benefits, anything was possible. If you didn't dare to think about it, it would only prove that you were stupid, and you would be eliminated. Forcing himself to calm down, Uehara Toda looked at Guan Xing with a bit of admiration in his eyes. Honorable Envoy, if I lead the army to attack Ashikaga Yoshimasa now, what kind of help can you give me? At this time, Guan Xing seemed to have changed into a different person. He was no longer as impulsive as before. His face regained a smile and said, "The 5-star army will send troops with you, General. We will send troops to Ping in Beijing and take it down. At the same time, I can assure you that unless there is an army in Shan'in Road that provokes the 5-star army, we will definitely not send troops there. There will only be one master here, and that is you, General Uehara." Whether it was a promise or a guarantee, at least the words were comfortable to listen to. Uehara Toda also knew that it was very difficult for the 5-star army to make such a promise in such a situation, because now he had no other choice. Other than finding a way to defeat Ashikaga Yoshimasa, he could only stay in place and wait for the other party to take the initiative to attack him. When that time came, he was afraid that he wouldn't even have the slightest chance of winning. Sooner or later, they would have to fight, so it was better to strike first and gain the upper hand. While the Flatwell Field was still fighting with the great general in Vietnam, he could take the initiative to send troops, and he could have one more ally, which would increase his chances of winning. Okay, I hope the honorable envoy will remember your promise. I need you to write what you just said into a document, and then announce it to the world. Uehara Toda stood up. At this time he was ready to send troops. No problem, then I wish you, General Uehara, to win every battle and be invincible. Guan Xing also stood up. He knew that this time he had completed the task given to him by the 6th young master. He had made a great contribution. Thank you for your kind words. Uehara Toda also laughed. He couldn't wait to see how powerful the great general's army was, and what kind of sparks would be created when the two sides collided on the battlefield. Since he had decided to send troops, of course, he couldn't have any hesitation. It was a taboo for a general to be indecisive. In just 3 days, 20,000 vanguard troops set off from the Shan'in Road, along the edge of Ping and Beijing to the Hokuriku Road, and rushed behind the great general. When the news reached the 5-star army's camp, Yang Chendong patted the desk and shouted, and then said to Beta Persei beside him, "Give the order, everything will be done according to the plan." "Yes, young master." Beta Persei was also very excited, and turned around to make the arrangements. Orders were sent out from the radio and spread to all directions. The armies, which had long been prepared for battle, were like dark clouds covering the moon, pressing towards the Japanese Empire's Kyoto, Ping and Beijing. In the Hokuriku Roads, Vietnam. After several fierce battles, Ashikaga Yoshimasa won another battle with the help of his troops that were several times more numerous than the other side, and finally occupied this area. According to the news, Flatwell Field only retreated to Echigo Prefecture with 20,000 people. The great general, who occupied Echigo and Echigo prefectures in succession, was full of righteousness. The powerful strength he showed also deterred some small warlords and small forces who wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to send troops to take advantage of him. As long as he occupied Echigo Prefecture, even if he didn't capture Flatwell Field alive, the situation would be settled. At that time, he could spare some time to deal with the 5-star army. He wanted to let everyone see that in the Japanese Empire he, the great general, was the most capable person, and this place would eventually belong to him. Chapter 1102. Ashikaga Yoshimasa hadn't even fully digested the news of victory when a letter personally written by Ninji Toshihide appeared in front of him. Then his face turned from green to red to white, and finally became as black as charcoal. Uehara Toshiru of the Mountain Inn village actually joined forces with the 5-star army, and it looked like they were going to attack him. This person only had 80,000 troops. Did he eat a bear's heart and leopard's guts? With only 80,000 people, he dared to attack his 500,000 troops? General Maori Regularization was in the big tent at the moment, waiting for the Supreme General's orders, and was lucky enough to see this letter. He also said with a puzzled face, "Supreme General, could Nishi Toshiru have been deceived?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa understood the meaning of Maori Regularization's words and asked, "Are you saying that this news is false?" It's not that I doubt Nishi Toshiru's news, but it really doesn't make sense. Who is Uehara Toshiru? He's famous for being slippery. How could he make an enemy out of the great general for no reason? Mao Li-zheng said seriously, as if he was discussing the matter. But only he knew in his heart that he didn't like Nishi Toshiru. The two of them were the Supreme General's right-hand men, and it was common for them to secretly fight. If there was a chance, of course, he wouldn't mind stepping on them. It makes sense. Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who also didn't understand, nodded lightly and said, "In this case, arrange people to go to the Mountain Inn village again to see Nishi Toshiru and see what's going on." Because of confidence, Ashikaga Yoshimasa never put Uehara Toshiru in his eyes, and he didn't think that he would take the initiative to attack him, so he didn't make any defensive preparations. Everything didn't change until 3 days later. In the main tent, Ashikaga Yoshimasa summoned his generals and daimyos, and was discussing how to send troops to Echigo Prefecture and how to kill Flatwell Field. Suddenly, a scout came into the tent with a panicked face. He knelt on the ground with an ugly face and handed over a letter in his hand. When the scout rushed into the tent, Ashikaga Yoshimasa felt that something was wrong. When he took the letter and read it, he only felt that his vision turned black. He forced himself to stand up and slammed the desk in front of him and said, "Baka! Uehara Toshiru, 5-star army, damn it!" This roar also startled the other generals. Maori Regularization was the first to react, took the letter on the desk and read it, then his face turned ugly and said, clenching his fists and said, "Supreme General, didn't you say that Matsumoto Kazuma is dead? How could he stand up and accuse us?" Throwing Maori Regularization a supercilious look, Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't know what was going on. It was just that the matter had already happened, and it was no longer the time to worry about this problem. The most important thing was how to deal with the current complicated situation. The letter had already said that the 5-star army was attacking Ping and Beijing, and they used powerful firearms. The city couldn't hold on any longer. Also, Uehara Toshiru had sent troops along the edge of Ping and Beijing to Echigo Prefecture. Fortunately, when he received Nishi Toshiru's letter, he sent someone to remind the troops guarding there, so when they were attacked, they didn't have the power to fight back. But after all, they didn't make a sufficient plan, so they might be able to hold on for a while, but it became a fact that they couldn't hold on. Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't expect that the situation that seemed to be favorable to him would suddenly change so much. His face became quite ugly. After a while, he forcibly suppressed his anger and began to analyze the situation rationally. "I'm afraid that Ping and Beijing won't be able to hold on. Since that's the case, immediately arrange for Fukada Tani to stay there, and let him save his strength and retreat first. As for Uehara Toshiru, I'll leave it to General Maori. I'll give you 100,000 troops. Do you have the confidence to defeat him?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't give up and continued to move forward. He wanted to capture Ekigo Prefecture and completely defeat the flat well field. In his eyes, the other forces in the country were nothing to be afraid of. Only this person was proficient in both the pen and the sword. If he didn't get rid of him, he would be a big problem in his heart. Yes, General, please rest assured, this subordinate will definitely complete the task. Leading an army of 100,000 troops, Maori Regularization's eyes were full of excitement and excitement. Good, the other plans remain unchanged. The main force of the army will continue to move to Ekigo Prefecture. The others will do what they should do. In short, this is the Japanese Empire, we won't lose. At the end of the meeting, Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't forget to cheer everyone up. At this time, his eyes also showed a sense of determination, but also a sense of resentment. This time, he was schemed against by the 5-star army and Uehara Tashiro. He will remember this hatred, and one day he will get his revenge. Ping and Beijing outskirts. At this moment, it has all become the territory of the 5-star army. When Yang Chendong's order was issued, the 4th Division and the 7th Army, who had been waiting here for a long time, launched a fierce attack on the Japanese army outside Ping and Beijing with 100mm mortars. The cannonballs that fell from the sky caught the Neon troops who were guarding there off guard. Fukada Tani, who was in charge of the defense of Ping and Beijing, felt great pressure in the situation where he couldn't even see where the enemy was. After half an hour of continuous artillery fire, they basically destroyed the anti-cavalry weapons, and even the formation of the army was in chaos. The soldiers didn't know their generals, and the generals didn't know their soldiers. At this time, there was a huge tremor on the ground, and the cavalry of the 5-star army began to attack. With the 1st Cavalry Division in the lead and the cavalry of the new 3 armies as support, there were more than 40,000 people in total. Looking from afar, it was as if a black tornado was rushing over, pressuring toward them. This horrifying scene in the eyes of Daimyo Fukadaya, he could not help but tremble all over. He had long heard that the cavalry of the 5-star army was very powerful, and that they could compete with the people on horseback, the descendants of the Mongolians, and the grassland cavalry, or even more powerful. For this reason, Fukada Tani not only prepared a lot of anti-cavalry stakes, but also enough bows and arrows. He wanted to give this cavalry a head-on attack and let them know how powerful he was. But now, when he really faced the cavalry of the 5-star army, he knew that the rumors were true. Just the momentum of this attack made people feel powerless. Not to mention that all of his preparations were already destroyed by the artillery fire. Block, block. Fukada Tani's heart was filled with fear, but his mouth was very tough. He called out the names of a few of his subordinates, and ordered them to block the cavalry of the 5-star army, while he himself led the main force to retreat to Ping and Beijing. He wanted to defend the high city, and these soldiers were left behind to buy time for his army to retreat. Charge! Kill! On the sturdy warhorse, Tian, who held his sword in one hand, and with the other hand he constantly made all kinds of hand gestures to command the cavalry to advance. With him as the leader, the arrow point formation was the first to meet the enemy, and then like a drill, they drilled into the enemy camp. As soon as they entered the enemy camp, Tian, who held his sword with both hands, and relying on his body's balance technique, he was as natural as sitting on a brick bed in his own house. Under his steady body, the two swords continuously slashed forward and to the side. The soldiers of the Japanese Empire were like scarecrows in training. In a short period of time, he had advanced more than 100 meters, and unexpectedly, no one was his match and no one was able to block his charge. Like Tian Hu, the other commanders and the arrow point formation of the arrow point formation were also doing the same thing. Wherever they went, no one was their match. Some of them were only wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves, some of them were only severed limbs, and some of them were only covered by the enemy's head and fled. For commanders, a total of 8,000 soldiers of the Japanese Empire were quickly penetrated. In addition to a large amount of blood on the ground, there were densely packed soldiers kneeling on the ground and begging to surrender. They were frightened by the powerful combat power of the 5-star army cavalry, and when they discovered that those who resisted were quickly decapitated, their fighting spirit began to collapse. More and more soldiers put down their dignity and knelt on the ground, becoming prisoners of war who had no dignity on the battlefield, but could live on. Continue to charge. The sixth young master has ordered us to quickly take Ping and Beijing, and we can't give the enemy any time to breathe. Major General Tian, who rode on his horse. After penetrating the enemy's defense system, he spurred his horse forward and continued to lead the cavalry towards the capital of Ping and Beijing. Ping and Beijing was the capital of the Japanese Empire. Although it was far less majestic than some of the cities in the Great Ming Dynasty because of its conditions, it still had its own unique characteristics. This place was about to become his territory. If possible, Yang Chendong didn't want to destroy it too much. That was why he gave the order to the cavalry before the attack. It would be best if they could storm into the city with lightning speed, but if they couldn't, they were to retreat first and leave everything to the 4th Division and the 7th Army's 2 firearms divisions. Yang Chendong had given him hope, so Tian, who naturally had to follow the best goal. Before the battle had even begun, he had already called over the 5 captains under him and expressed his stance. We are the 1st Cavalry Division, the most powerful existence in the 5-star army. Now is the time to prove ourselves. Do you all have the confidence to complete the mission? The 5 commanders all stood in the most standard military posture and replied. This was the reason why they were in front of them. They were completely unsatisfied with defeating the Japanese army and occupying the periphery of Ping and Beijing. Their goal was to storm into the city and make a great contribution. In the rear, Ling Daqiang, the commander of the 4th Division, and Tian Su, the commander of the 7th Army, used binoculars to watch the 1st Cavalry Division continuously advance forward. When they put down the binoculars, the 2 commanders rubbed their eyes and revealed an incredulous expression. At this moment, their inner thoughts were extremely unified. The 1st Cavalry Division was the 1st Division, and they were worthy of this name. They were like madmen on the battlefield, invincible. They actually did as the 6th young master said and were about to storm into Ping and Beijing without the support of their artillery. Chapter 1103. The time to sigh was very short. The changes on the battlefield were often abnormal, so it was impossible to give the commander more time to think. All soldiers, listen to my order. Run and keep up. Charge into Ping and Beijing and occupy the capital of Hainan. Charge into Ping and Beijing and occupy the capital of Hainan. The 2 division commanders couldn't let Tian Hu take all the credit. They also wanted a share of the pie. Thus, they broke their original plan of waiting and watching. They began to speed up and run forward. The new army commander Su, he also had the same idea. He was once a general of the Tatar tribe, and had competed with Tian Hu for the position of commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. Seeing that his brother's cavalry didn't stay on the battlefield and continued to charge forward, he gritted his teeth and said, 4th Cavalry Division, stay behind and clean up the battlefield. The other 3 divisions, follow me and charge forward. Charge. The original plan of fighting steadily was completely changed. Under the leadership of Major General Tian Hu, tens of thousands of 5-star army soldiers gave up on the steady rhythm and changed to charging forward. It seemed like they wouldn't stop until they entered Ping and Beijing. This made Fukada Tani, who was leading his troops to retreat, suffer. After running for a while, he arrived at Ping and Beijing. When he turned around, he saw that the 5-star army cavalry was less than 5 or 6 miles away from him. He immediately lost his mind. How dare you! Pointing angrily at the 1st Cavalry Division that was hot on his heels, Shen Tianya really wanted to reprimand them, and even more wanted to warn them that the capital of Peace City had solid walls. It was not a place where they could behave atrociously. Fukada Daimyo, let's enter the city first. Some of his subordinates saw that Fukada Tani was so angry that his face turned red. Although they were surprised by the arrogance of the 5-star army cavalry, they knew that they would only be safe if they entered the city. Shouting like this now was useless. All right, let's enter the city and order the soldiers to shoot arrows up the city walls. I would like to see if these cavalry can still fly up when faced with the solid city gates and city walls. Fukada Tani suppressed the anger in his heart. After saying this to his subordinates, He turned around and entered Ping in Beijing. After that, the city gate closed from the inside, completely closing when the 1st Cavalry Division was about 700 to 800 meters away. Once the city gates were closed, it was as if all dangers were isolated from the outside world. The Japanese army soldiers inside the gate let out a long sigh of relief. At the same time, more people rushed towards the two sides of the passage. They wanted to rush up the tower and use their bows and arrows to return fire. They wanted to let these arrogant 5-star army cavalry know the consequences of angering them. Major General Tian Hu was charging forward with all his strength, watched as the south gate of Ping in Beijing was closed. His expression did not change at all. Since he wanted to attack Ping in Beijing in one go, he naturally made sufficient preparations before doing so. Where is the 1st Regiment commander? Tian Hu slowed down the speed of his warhorse and turned around to ask. Commander, I'm here, Temu, answered loudly from dozens of meters behind him on the left. As the tip of another arrow, he had been following behind Tian Hu the whole time, never leaving or abandoning him. When he saw Temu and realized that he was very close to him, Tian Hu's original serious expression changed. He laughed loudly and said, "Very good, 1st Regiment Commander. I'll leave the rest to you. Whether or not you can obtain the first merit will depend on your performance. Please rest assured, Commander. Leave everything to the 1st Regiment," Temu said with great ambition. Temu said with great ambition. Then he suddenly tore open his jacket, revealing 4 black-headed, wooden-handled grenades. Temu was not the only one who did this. His entire team of about 30 people tore open their coats, revealing the tightly wrapped grenades. Their faces were filled with bloodthirsty murderous intent. This was a group of lunatics. They actually strapped grenades to their bodies during a battle. If there were any sparks or if the fuse was accidentally triggered, wouldn't there be a huge accident? But it had to be said that although they were crazy, they had succeeded. At least they had not encountered any accidents when they reached this place. And it was because of their risk that they now had the opportunity to break through the city gate. Temu and the other 30 people were making preparations. Tian Hu was not idle either. He rode his horse to the south gate of Ping in Beijing. He put away his dual swords and picked up his strong bow. He aimed at the top of the city gate tower and was ready to shoot at any time. Almost as soon as Tian Hu and his cavalrymen knocked their bows and arrows, many small heads of the Japanese army popped out from the city gate tower. They also had their bows and arrows ready and were looking down, ready to shoot their targets. As soon as they popped their heads out, both sides looked at each other and saw clearly. Tian Hu's voice was then heard. "Release the arrows. Don't let them interfere with the 1st Regiment commander and the others." Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The sound of arrows piercing through the air was incessant. The sharp arrows were shot directly at the Japanese army soldiers who had popped their heads out. In a moment of carelessness, dozens of Japanese army soldiers were shot. Some of them collapsed to the ground, while others fell from the tall city gate tower. This scene also frightened the other Japanese army soldiers. They quickly shrank back, trying to stay alive like turtles. Fukada Tani, who had just arrived at the city gate tower, saw this scene. He immediately shouted angrily, "What are you afraid of? We have the high ground and we have the city gate as our defense. They should be the ones who are worried. Everyone, return fire immediately. Return fire." Under the command of their general, the soldiers finally had a backbone. They were no longer as scared as before and could finally organize a decent counterattack. With the advantage of having the high ground, they caused a lot of trouble for the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division. They didn't have as many soldiers as the other side, and the terrain wasn't favorable to them. If it were any other army, they wouldn't take the risk to fight this battle. Even in front of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian Hu's expression was still cold. He immediately ordered the soldiers to take out their shields. 2 people in a group. 1 person with a bow and the other with a shield. We must create an opportunity for the 1st Regiment commander and the others to blow open the city gate. Tian Hu's voice was very calm. It was obvious that this wasn't a temporary idea. In fact, the 1st Cavalry Division had also undergone such training in the past. It was to prevent such a situation from happening. The preparation came in handy. 2 soldiers formed a group. One person held a shield to protect himself and his comrades, while the other person held a bow to look for an opportunity to counterattack. Arrows fell like rain. There were nearly 10,000 Japanese Empire soldiers on the top of the southern city gate of Ping and Beijing. Even if each of them released an arrow, the momentum was enough to frighten people. Once the arrows fell from the sky and hit the cavalry below, it was like a torrential downpour. It was said that a chaotic fist could kill a master. Under the chaotic arrows, even the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division couldn't guarantee that they could escape unscathed. In less than half an hour, nearly 100 soldiers had been hit by arrows. Among them, more than 10 people had been hit in the vital areas and had already died. Hurry up, hurry up. Tian, who was very unwilling to see his brothers die in such a cowardly defense. When he turned to look at Temu, his voice was filled with urgency. At this time, Temu and the others had already removed all the grenades from their bodies and tied them together in groups of 4. After hearing his division commander's shout, Temu was the first to charge. With his superb horse-riding skills, he held a shield in one hand and the 4 grenades tied together in the other. He charged fiercely toward the southern city gate of Ping and Beijing. Yang Chendong had once issued an order in the army. Unless it was absolutely necessary, the regimental commander or officers above the regimental commander level were not allowed to charge at will. After all, it wasn't easy to train such a high-ranking officer. He didn't want these outstanding talents to die in the chaos of a charge. Since it was Yang Chendong's order, everyone had to carry it out unconditionally. This was the importance of corps authority. However, this time, Temu broke this rule. Tian, who was watching all of this from a short distance, didn't stop him. This was because he knew very well that rules were dead, but people were alive. The more critical the situation was, the more important it was for a general to stand up and set an example. Temu took the lead and was the first to reach the city gate. When he reached the city gate, he threw the 4 grenades with their fuses already pulled out. Boom, 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 loud vibrations were heard. After a cloud of smoke, all the cavalrymen couldn't help but look toward the city gate. Unfortunately, it only covered the iron gate with a layer of black smoke. It didn't have much effect on the overall situation. Even grenades didn't work? It had to be said that the people of the Japanese Empire were very serious in their work. The quality of the city gate was really good. At the very least, it was beyond the expectations of the soldiers of the world's #1 Cavalry Division. Don't stop. Keep going. As long as you keep blasting, there's nothing you can't break. Tian, who wasn't discouraged even though his attack didn't work. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought so many grenades in one go. Yes, continue. Temu had just retreated. He was initially shocked by the lack of effect. Now that he heard Tianhu's words, he nodded vigorously and ordered the other soldiers to continue charging. The explosions weren't completely useless. On the city gate tower, the soldiers of the Japanese Empire felt a tremor under their feet. Some of the more timid ones had already squatted down and covered their heads. As the commanding general, Fukada Tani was indeed a little more courageous. It wasn't that he wasn't afraid. It was just that he woke up earlier than the others. Haha, did you see that? Firearms are useless against the city gate. Everyone, don't worry. Continue to shoot arrows at the city gate tower. We have to use this opportunity to kill more enemies and gain more merits. Fukada Tani was very active at this moment. Relying on the advantage of defending the city, Fukada Tani was already fantasizing about the scene where they could inflict heavy damage on the cavalrymen of the 5-star army and gain great merits. Below the southern city gate, bundles of grenades were still exploding. The seemingly thick iron gate finally showed signs of loosening under the continuous bombardment. For this, the world's #1 Cavalry Division had paid the price of hundreds of men. Although less than 100 of them were killed by the arrows, more than 300 of them were injured. Many of them had already lost their ability to fight. It was conceivable that after this battle, they wouldn't be able to recover to their peak and could no longer stay in the army. Chapter 1104. Tian, whose heart bled at the sight of such heavy losses. These were all elite warriors. Losing any one of them would cause him to feel heartache, not to mention losing so many of them at once. Anxious, he continued to shout, "Regiment Commander 1, I'll give you 3 minutes. If you can't blow up the city gate, you'll be kicked out of the 1st Cavalry Division." Taimu was still watching his subordinates throw grenades at the city gate. Because of this, 3 of his brothers had already been killed by arrows and 2 of them were seriously injured. He was also feeling terrible. When he heard Tianhu's words, he was instantly enraged. "Come on, everyone, gather all the grenades and give them to me. I'll go all out." This was the only thought in Taimu's mind. There was nothing sadder than watching his brothers die in battle in front of him. Sometimes he wished he was the one who died. In order to reduce the losses and open the city gate faster, Taimu decided to go all out on his own. No one dared to disobey their regiment commander's orders. The soldiers around him quickly gathered the grenades and delivered them to Taimu. Everyone seemed to know what their regiment commander was going to do. One of his company commanders took the initiative and said, "Regiment commander, let me go. The power of so many grenades combined is too great. It's too dangerous. Our regiment can't do without our regiment commander." "Yeah, we can't do without our regiment commander," the other soldiers chimed in. "Cut the crap. I know what I'm going to do." Taimu didn't intend to listen to everyone's opinions. This was because he knew that this was an extremely dangerous move. What was dangerous was not whether they could reach the city gate, but the power of so many grenades exploding at the same time. The shock wave from the explosion would often cause people to be affected before they could completely retreat. That was the real danger. But so what if he knew it was dangerous? He was the regiment commander and enjoyed more glory than anyone else. When there was danger, he should naturally be the one to face it. Only then would he be worthy of everything he was enjoying now. With a cold expression, Taimu quickly tied all the grenades together. Looking at the bag of fire that was the size of a bag of explosives, he let out a silly laugh. He didn't believe that the city gate would be able to withstand such powerful explosives. "Everyone back off. Back off some more." Taimu weighed the explosive's power and realized that it could barely be held with one hand. Then he began to prepare to charge. Everyone retreated reluctantly and unwillingly. This was the military rule of the 5-star army. Once the commanding officer gave an order, the soldiers under him had to obey. It was this iron discipline that allowed them to fight well and win every battle. Let's go. Taimu removed the bow, shield, and 2 sabers from his horse. He wanted to go into battle light and maintain his fastest speed and best condition. After doing all this, he shouted boldly and galloped toward the city gate. The commotion here attracted the attention of the division commander, Tianhu. When he saw Taimu rushing down the city gate tower alone on his horse, he couldn't help but cry out in alarm. "F***CK, Regiment Commander 1, come back." Taimu, who was already halfway out, couldn't carry out any military orders now. As the saying went, there was no turning back. If he stopped now, he would only suffer greater losses. Seeing Taimu rush toward the city gate without hesitation, Tianhu, who usually didn't show his emotions on his face, had tears in his eyes. "Brother, I wish you good luck. Everyone else, quickly retreat. Retreat." Knowing the power of so many grenades combined, Tianhu gave the order for the cavalry to retreat. Below the city gate tower, many Japanese Empire soldiers saw Taimu galloping toward them on horseback. Although they didn't know what he was going to do, they instinctively aimed their arrows at him. In a short period of time, Taimu was hit by 2 arrows. Fortunately, he was very experienced and managed to avoid the fatal blow. The 2 arrows only caused minor injuries to him. "Grandsons, have a taste of the gifts Grandpa has prepared for you." Taimu, who had arrived at the city gate, pulled out a set of grenades with his left hand and threw them down the city gate. Then he pounced toward a puddle of water below the city gate tower. With such great power, he wouldn't even have the chance to retreat. Not to mention, there were so many Japanese Empire soldiers eyeing him from the city gate tower. Taimur didn't plan to go back. Instead, he threw himself into the puddle of water, gambling on his luck. Just as Taimur's figure plunged into the puddle of water, a loud bang was heard. At this moment, the ground was shaking violently. Even the Japanese army soldiers on the city gate tower felt like they were losing their balance. Tian Hu and the others, who were a few hundred meters away from the city gate, were better off. After all, they had already mentally prepared themselves. However, after hearing the loud bang and not seeing Taimur running back, Tian Hu couldn't help but feel his eyes turn red. "Brothers, the city gate has been blown open. Our 1st Regiment commander paid the price with his life. Everyone listen to my orders. Charge." Influenced by Taimur, the eyes of the other soldiers also turned red. Then, under the command of their division commander, all of them rushed toward the south gate that had been blown open by the powerful grenades. Right now, they only had one thought in mind: to avenge their 1st Regiment commander and wipe out the Japanese army. With the city gate broken, the cavalry of the 5-star army rushed into the city. Fukada Tani, who had a smug look on his face, turned gloomy. Very quickly, it turned into fear. He knew that they were done for this time. Although there weren't many cavalrymen, the morale of the troops was in chaos. They couldn't put up any effective resistance at all. "General, let's retreat." 2 soldiers walked up to Fukada Tani anxiously and helped him up. Then, they quickly ran down the city gate tower. After the 1st Cavalry Division entered the city, their advantage began to increase. With the help of the war horses, wherever they went, the Japanese army was slaughtered until they were wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. At the same time, because the 1st Cavalry Division's movements were too fast, a lot of the Japanese army's supplies were left behind. When Tian Hu saw the mountain of rations and equipment under the escort of a group of soldiers, a smile finally appeared on this Major General's face. What made him even happier was that the 1st Regiment of soldiers found Taimur at the bottom of the city gate tower. He had cleverly jumped into the ditch and managed to survive with the protection of the water. However, the power of the explosion was too strong, and he was knocked unconscious. At the same time, his armor was torn, and his back was covered in wounds. "Taimur is still alive. That's great. Gather the best medical officers in the division immediately. We must preserve the life of the 1st Regiment commander. Our world's #1 Cavalry Division cannot be without him." Tian Hu was naturally overjoyed as he spoke. Then he couldn't stop laughing foolishly. After the 1st Cavalry Division entered the city, they first guarded some important places in the city. In the end, because of the lack of manpower, they did not chase after Fukada Tani and the rest of the Japanese army who had escaped. More than 2 hours later, the new army also entered the city, and the situation in the city was completely stabilized. At this point, it could be announced that Ping and Beijing had completely fallen into the hands of the 5-star army. Yang Chendong entered Ping and Beijing the next afternoon, accompanied by Junko. The 1st Cavalry Division did not disappoint. Under the circumstances where the 4th Army Division and the 7th Army Firearms Division were not in place, they blew up the city gate alone and made a great contribution. This made Yang Chendong very happy. He first went to the temporary hospital to visit Taimur, who had already been treated and had woken up. From the military doctor, he learned that Taimur only had a back injury and that it was not a serious problem. After resting for a few days, he could continue to fight. Yang Chendong was even more happy. In the temporary hospital, in front of everyone, he recorded Taimur's first-class merit and at the same time awarded him a Medal of Bravery. This was the first time the Medal of Bravery was presented to the public. In the past, people had only heard of it, but no one had ever seen it, let alone received this honor. In the midst of everyone's envy, Taimur received the Medal of Bravery. His entire body was grinning from ear to ear. At this moment he enjoyed everyone's congratulations and blessings, but he also enjoyed all the envy and jealousy. Major General Tian, who was also one of them. He had also dreamed of receiving this medal of bravery one day. This was the only way to prove his strength. However, this time, not only did he not receive it, but he was also reprimanded by Yang Chendong. Didn't I say that regimental officers can't casually charge with the army? You, on the other hand, directly let the regiment commander take the risk. Fortunately, nothing happened to Tae-mu. Otherwise, I would definitely punish you. After there was no one else around, Yang Chendong's face turned cold as he reprimanded Tianhu. Teacher, I was wrong. Tianhu, who had always been proud, did not even dare to breathe when facing Yang Chendong. He knew very well who gave him everything he had. And this time, he was indeed a little reckless. Seeing that Tianhu's attitude of admitting his mistake was not bad, Yang Chendong's anger subsided. Alright, don't do it again. Also, you guys have worked hard this time. When you go back, look for Beta Persei. He will prepare enough wine and meat for you to celebrate. But when he heard that there was a celebration, Tianhu chuckled. At this moment, he was no different from a child who had received candy. This was all because this celebration was arranged by his teacher for the 1st Cavalry Division. This was enough to prove that their division's performance in this operation was the best, and the best. Just as Tianhu thought, once the news that the 1st Cavalry Division was allowed to hold a celebration by Yang Chendong spread, it attracted the envy and jealousy of the other divisions. Chapter 1105. The 5-star army was usually treated very well. Even when there was no war, they were always given food and wine. However, this celebration banquet was different. The 6th young master had given them special permission. This proved the importance of the 1st Cavalry Division. We have to perform well. Next time, we can't let the world's 1st Cavalry Division get all the glory. Su He, the commander of the new 3rd Army, called over a few of his division commanders and said with high fighting spirit, "That's right. As long as we work hard, the new army will definitely be the one celebrating next time," said the division commanders in unison. The same scene was happening in the other units as well. Even the 4th and 7th divisions of the Lu army were not spared from this. The cold front represented the most elite troops. However, ever since the 1st Cavalry Division appeared, they had lost a lot of their limelight. Because of this, the division commanders of the 4th Division and 7th Division were very depressed. They secretly decided that they would perform better in the next battle. They wanted to prove to the world that the cold front was still the cold front. They were still the most powerful existence. An army's morale, equipment, and combat power were the comprehensive criteria to determine whether an army was strong or not. Everyone had their own thoughts. How to unify these people's thoughts and unleash double the power of an army was something the commander had to consider. If the commander was good, it was very likely that 10,000 people could unleash the combat power of 20,000 or even more. On the other hand, if the commander was not good, the 10,000 people might not even be able to unleash half of their combat power. A single celebration banquet was enough to ignite the fighting spirit of all the troops. This was the embodiment of Yang Chendong's talent in commanding. In particular, Tae-mu, receiving the 1st Hero's Medal, had greatly stimulated the others. Tae-mu, used to be a Manchu. He was promoted to the Han race because of his outstanding performance. He had received the 1st Warrior's Medal, which was more representative. It showed that the 6th young master treated everyone equally. At the same time, it also encouraged more people. They believed that as long as they did not care about their background, they would also have a better performance and receive more honor through hard work. The appearance of the celebration banquet and the warrior medal had already excited the soldiers of the 5-star army stationed in Ping and Beijing. They couldn't wait to fight on the battlefield. They needed a better opportunity and platform to perform. Yang Chendong didn't seem to care about all this. At this moment, he was accompanying Princess Junko in the Imperial Palace in Ping in Beijing. When he returned to this place again, the environment had not changed much, but his companions had indeed changed. Now that her father and mother were gone, Junko could only rely on her husband, Yang Chendong. In a long corridor in the Imperial Palace, Junko leaned into Yang Chendong's arms like a little bird. Her eyes were looking at Mount Fuji, also known as Sakura Mountain, not far away. King, you will accompany Junko until she is old, right? King, you will never abandon Junko or dislike Junko, right? King, even if Junko is old and no longer young and beautiful, you will still like Junko, right? King, yes. Haratoda, who was on his way to the Northern Land Road from the Shanin Road, received the news that the Five-Star Army had conquered Ping and Beijing. So fast. When he received the news, Uehara Toda was resting in a temporary tent, and then his face showed a shocked expression. He thought that with the strength of the Five-Star Army, conquering Ping and Beijing with only 30,000 people was just a matter of time, but he did not expect it to be so fast. From the beginning to the end of the attack, it was less than 2 days. Did the seemingly well-defended Japanese Empire's Kyoto fall just like that? He did not know whether he should be lamenting the incompetence of the Supreme General's subordinates, or the Five-Star Army was too powerful. But no matter what the result was, Uehara Toda knew that he should speed up. He wanted to take advantage of the fact that the Supreme General was heavily injured to fight back. He wanted to let others know that not only was the Five-Star Army good at fighting, but he was also very good at fighting. Pass down the order, don't rest, immediately speed up the march, reach Ekizen Prefecture as soon as possible, and stab Ashikaga Yoshimasa in the ass. Uehara Toda was stimulated and finally decided to speed up the march. He, who was eager to make a contribution, did not know that there was a big ambush waiting for him in front. Ruon Narrow area, adjacent to the Shanin Road's Danho Prefecture, is the gateway to the Northern Land Road. Uehara Toda suddenly appeared with 70,000 soldiers, and it seemed to have caught the enemy off guard. After resisting for a while, the Supreme General's army began to retreat, giving up the entire Ruon Narrow area, and Uehara Toda won the first battle. After winning the first battle, Uehara Toda's morale quickly swelled, and he continued to send his troops to Etsu Prefecture. In his opinion, the Supreme Generalissimo should be focused on dealing with Hirai Ueda, and he would not have time to deal with him. This was his chance. Ekizen Prefecture, one of the largest prefectures in the Northern Land Road. Here, the Maori regularization led 100,000 Japanese army to wait for the arrival of Uehara Toda. In order to lure this opponent to appear faster, the Japanese army in Ruon Narrow area took the initiative to retreat. All of this was also the order of the Maori regularization. The purpose was to make the opponent proud and arrogant, and then when the opponent was the most complacent and the defense was the most lax, they would give a heavy blow, proving to the Japanese Empire that the Supreme General's army was still the most capable. Dashi River is the burial ground that the Maori regularization prepared for Uehara Toda's 70,000 soldiers. This is a river that was brought inland by the sea. In the beginning, it was used to irrigate the farmland. Later, after the passage of time, it became a large river that was 17 or 18 meters wide. It meandered along the side of the road, like a long dragon entrenched in this area. The Maori regularization set the attack site here after serious consideration. With the river as the base, once the battle starts, the existence of Dashi River will become an excellent cover, allowing him to launch all kinds of attacks as he pleases. The Dashi River was blocked by a dense forest. It was precisely because of the existence of this forest that soil erosion was prevented, which prevented the river from continuing to expand. The Maori regularization's backup plan was placed in this dense forest. After the Supreme General gave the task, the Maori regularization began to prepare. First, he arranged for people to speed up the construction of the catapults. He doesn't need to attack too far away, as long as the catapults can hit more than 40 meters away, that is, 120 meters away. At that time, he is confident that the enemy can only defend and not attack. The requirements are not high, and he has the full support of the Supreme General, and the construction is in the dense forest, so he can use the nearby materials. 300 small catapults were quickly built, and after experiments, it was confirmed that the catapults can hit more than 50 meters to 100 meters. The Maori regularization was already very satisfied. 10,000 soldiers were left in the dense forest, and an average of 30 people were left in front of each catapult. It was enough. Mao Lijing brought the rest of the 90,000 soldiers to the other side of Dazahi, hiding in the uneven terrain about 5 miles away from Dazahi. Now, what he has to do is wait for the fish to take the bait. Completely unaware of all this, Uehara Toda, who was eager to prove himself, only arranged some scouts to do the preliminary battle, and quickly went all the way to Ekizan Prefecture. When those scouts passed by one side of the Daji River, they didn't stop there, because such a wide river was the safest place. Nobody could make use of such a terrain to set an ambush. However, they ignored the dense woods behind the river. After 6 days of preparation, Uehara Toda appeared, and together with him, there was a vast army of 70,000 soldiers walking on the official road, and looking from afar, there was no end to it. However, for many people, this would be the last time they would walk on this land because it wouldn't be long before they would meet the King of Hell and become a soul without a physical body, or even a pile of bones without a soul. Perhaps the shinobi wanted to destroy Uehara Toda, but in the afternoon he ordered the army to stop and camp, and stop at the side of Dashi River. Maybe he thought that resting by the river would be safe and solve the problem of the army's water source. When the Maori regularization, who was already prepared to attack, heard this news, he almost jumped up in excitement. In the end, he suppressed his excitement and decided to change the time of the battle. When the opponent's military tents are set up, and when the opponent's army is eating, he will launch a fierce attack, and he will get the best result. More than an hour later, the sky gradually darkened, and the smell of food wafted out of the camp by the river. At this time, countless boulders suddenly fell from the sky. Some of them were catapults that threw gunpowder that the Neon had learned from the Great Ming Dynasty. For a time, it was like a heavy rain, falling into Uehara Toda's army, making the 70,000-man army dizzy. The sudden attack, whether it was the gunpowder or the boulders, most of them fell beside the military tents, and some of them accurately fell in the military tents, killing many people on the spot. Watching this scene, Uehara Toda, who was lucky enough not to be hit, was scared and horrified. He did not expect that the Grand General had already sent people to stop him. To think that he had thought that no one would know about his actions. But at this moment, he didn't have time to think about why the news was leaked, why the Army General's army was defeated again and again, and why he prepared an ambush in advance and organized this unexpected counterattack. Now, he was only thinking about how to counterattack and stabilize his position. Under Yang Chendong's orders, the secret letter that Dao Xiao forced Ning Shidaxiu to write finally worked, and it gave Ashikaga Yoshimasa more time to react, which led to Uehara Toda's current disaster. Chapter 1106. After all, Uehara Toda was the general of the army, and he had been in charge of the mountain for many years, so he still had basic military knowledge. Through the trajectory of the falling boulders, he quickly locked the location of the attack behind the dense forest. He immediately ordered people to try to shoot arrows into the dense forest, wanting to reverse the situation in one fell swoop. Maori regularization was already prepared for this. With the dense forest as a defense, ordinary arrows couldn't shoot in at all, not to mention that the ambush team was already far away from the range of the arrows. On the other hand, the catapults were launched from a distance and could ignore the dense forest. This created an overwhelming advantage. They could only take a beating and not hit anyone. After an hour of attack, who knows how many explosives and boulders fell in the encampment? Who knows how many people were killed and injured? Finally, the attack slowed down, and the materials that had been prepared for several days were about to be used up. The main character, Mao Lijing, appeared. As early as half an hour ago, he actually started the operation, but because of the distance, he always needed time to close the distance between the two sides. When they could finally see Uehara Toda's army camp, it happened to be when the catapult stopped working. Then, under Maori regularization's order, the 90,000 troops were like a swarm of wasps, densely packed and overwhelming. If the army wasn't in chaos, 70,000 people would have the power to fight 90,000 people. On the contrary, Uehara Toda, who was defending, might have a certain advantage. But now the army was scattered, and the casualties were heavy. Under the chaos of the army, how could they organize a decent counterattack? Seeing the dense enemy rushing over, the army's morale quickly collapsed. The 70,000 troops didn't even have the chance to organize a decent resistance, and they were scattered by the flow of soldiers coming from afar. The army was defeated like a landslide. At this moment, only such words could be used to describe it. Faced with the sudden arrival of Maori regularization's 90,000 troops, it was like a divine army descending from the sky. On one side, the army's morale was scattered, and on the other side, the battle was about to end before it even started. This was not a fair battle. If Uehara Toda could make the right judgment from the beginning of the attack and lead the troops to escape from here, maybe he could return to the mountain inn and find a way to reorganize. But now, Uehara Toda, who didn't have time to make any preparations, was surrounded by Maori regularization and then killed in the chaos. Uehara Toda was dead. Uehara Toda, who controlled the 80,000 troops and the actual ruler of the mountain in the mountain area, was dead. His death also meant that the series of treaties he had signed with Yang Chendong had become a waste of paper. After receiving the news through the telegram, the special envoy who signed the contract got up and walked toward the great Zay County Magistrate's mansion. Day's mountain in the mountain in the mountain in the mountain in the mountain. The warlord in charge of guarding this place was called Sensei Naganabu. He was the leader of the younger generation of the Kozii family, and he was also the person who was chosen by Yang Chendong. The Kozii family was a family with a long history in the Japanese Empire. Their ancestors were once glorious, and there were records that the earliest rulers of the mountain in the mountain in the mountain area were actually the Kozii family. But that was an ancient legend, and there was no way to verify it. In the eyes of many people, this was just the Kozii family's people flattering themselves. But as a member of the Kozii family, they were proud of it, and they dreamed that one day they could rebuild their glory and prove that the Kozii family's bloodline was the strongest. Dreams were beautiful, but reality was cruel. In the chaotic Japanese Empire, the warlords were everywhere, and the Kozii family who retreated to the Days Mountain only had a 10,000-man army. This 10,000-man army was already the most powerful existence in the Days Mountain, but compared to the other warlords nearby, it seemed so weak. Not to mention facing the hundreds of thousands of troops of the great general Ashikaga Yoshimasa, even facing the actual ruler of the mountain in the mountain in the mountain in the mountain, the 10,000-man army in their hands was simply not enough. Since the time was not ripe, they could only continue to lie low and wait for the opportunity to rise. Opportunities were always prepared for those who were prepared. Guan Xing came to the door. The two sides had been in contact before, and the Kozii family accepted him as the special envoy of the 5-star army. This time, he directly appeared in front of Sensei Naganabu. There's news from the front lines. Uehara Toda was ambushed by the Maori regularization and died in the battle. Now the mountain in 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 the mountain. The great general's tentacles are about to reach here. Meiji-kun, your chance to shine has come. Guan Xing said the new news with a serious face. At this moment, Sensei Naganabu's face was already red, representing the excitement in his heart. That's great, it's finally time for the Kozii family to rise. Thank you very much, envoy. The Kozii family is also willing to follow Bugnam of Gojoseon's lead and listen to his orders. There was no free lunch in the sky. Guan Xing supported Sensei Naganabu on the basis that the Kozii family was willing to follow Yang Chendong's lead. Without this premise, a small county magistrate with a 10,000-man army wouldn't be able to afford Guan Xing's personal visit. Very good, I will convey your loyalty to Bugnam of Gojoseon. Let's proceed according to the plan. Rest assured, Meiji-kun, the 5-star army will cooperate with you in the dark. Guan Xing nodded with satisfaction. One needed a chance to rise, while the other needed a puppet to achieve his goal. The two sides hit it off and quickly walked together. Yang Chendong's plan was finally revealed. The so-called alliance with Uehara Toda was just a formality. There were too few things that Uehara Toda could ask for help from him. If he supported him greatly, he might be able to severely damage the great general's forces and even defeat them. But who could guarantee that after victory, Uehara Todo wouldn't become the next great general? Since he couldn't be controlled, he might as well not control him and just treat him as an abandoned pawn. This was why Dao Xiao forced Ning Shidaxiu to write a letter so that Ashikaga Yoshimasa could make preparations in advance. When the plan reached this point, Sensei Naganabu, who could be controlled, appeared. He would become the representative of the five-star army and help them unify the Japanese Empire. Sensei Naganabu, who had the support of the five-star army, was full of confidence. He first sent people to invite the two county magistrates to his house. At the banquet, a pile of silver was brought out. Pointing at the 200,000 taels of silver, Mingji Changxin promised that as long as the two county magistrates recognized him as their leader, each of them could take 100,000 taels of silver back. At the same time, they would also receive a monthly payment of silver. If they achieved outstanding military service, they would also be heavily rewarded. No one wouldn't be tempted. Relying on the silver, Sensei Naganabu's force increased from 10,000 people to 30,000 people. It was still not enough to be an enemy of the great general, but at least it was a good start. At this moment, Sensei Naganabu was full of confidence and began to conquer the world. Ping in Beijing Imperial Palace. This place had become the place where Yang Chendong's camp was located. The side hall, which was originally used to receive ministers, had been changed into a military conference room. A large sand table had been placed on the table. If one looked carefully, they would find that the Nanhai Road of Neon was marked on it. They had already occupied Ping in Beijing, Zakado, and Shanyodu. Now that Shanyodu had the Masayoshi family as their representative, the five-star army's progress after entering the Japanese Empire could be said to be smooth. Considering the lack of military strength, Yang Chendong decided to stop expanding on land and set his sights on the sea. As the Japanese Empire's largest naval base, Nankado would be his next main target. In the conference room, Yang Chendong's eyes casually fell on the commander of the C-4th Division, Ding Yen, and said, "Tell me about the situation." "Yes, 6th young master." Ding Yen stood up, then picked up a wooden stick that had been placed earlier. He pointed to the sand table and said, "Everyone, please take a look. Nanhai Road is surrounded by water on all sides and the sea on the east side. It has become an independent existence separate from the entire Neon land, especially Ji Prefecture, which belongs to this area. It is located to the south of Ping and Beijing and can be a threat to us at any time. It really makes people restless." Nankado is also the base of the Japanese Empire's naval forces because of its unique geography. According to the Intelligence Department, there are thousands of ships and 400,000 soldiers in the Japanese Empire. Some of the ships are also equipped with earth cannons, which have an effective attack range of up to 1,200 meters. Although it is not as good as some of the Big F countries, it is not far behind. If the distance is too far, it will also become a threat. The commander of the Japanese Empire's naval forces in Nankado is called Mr. Kuroda. He is an experienced veteran of naval warfare. At the same time, he is also a direct subordinate of Ashikaga Yoshimasa. He is highly valued by him. Due to the geography of Nankado, there are many large reefs in the nearby waters. Once a large ship gets close and goes the wrong way, it is very likely to hit the bottom and sink. Although our intelligence department has worked very hard and obtained a lot of information about the geography of this area, no one can be sure that there is nothing left out. Before we have a complete understanding of the situation, I do not recommend launching a large-scale attack. Ding Yen was ordered to give a detailed explanation of the situation in Nanhai Province, including the comparison of the enemy's military strength and the comparison of the environmental conditions. Listening to this, the other officers at the meeting all had a solemn expression. Compared to the 400,000 soldiers of the Japanese army and more than 1,000 ships of various types, they still had the geographical advantage. On the five-star army's side, there were only High 4 and High 5 divisions. Together, there were only 240 ships. Even if they added the 20,000 soldiers of the Korean Navy and more than 100 ships, There were only less than 40,000 soldiers and 400 ships. With less than 40,000 soldiers against 400,000 and 400 ships against more than 1,000 ships, this battle was not going to be easy. To be more precise, they would be thankful if the Japanese Empire's navy did not attack them, let alone take the initiative to start a naval war. Chapter 1107. However, when everyone's gazes landed on Yang Chendong, who was sitting at the head of the table, everyone's expressions calmed down a lot. As long as the sixth young master was there, no one knew what fear was. Countless facts had proven that the sixth young master was extremely good at defeating enemies with fewer people. As the soul of the army, Yang Chendong felt everyone's gazes on him, but he didn't feel uncomfortable at all. This was because he didn't know how many times he had experienced this kind of situation. This was just one of the countless times he had experienced it. Alright, Commander Ding has already explained the situation very clearly. I'm sure everyone knows what we're going to face next. And this young master only has one thing to add. Although the enemy has 400,000 soldiers, they're actually just a motley crew. Their cannons have a short firing range and they're very old. It's very troublesome to reload them. Not only are our weapons superior to theirs, but we're also not too far behind them in terms of military strength. You should know that this time, we're mobilizing the army and the navy. When Yang Chendong's confident voice resounded in the hall, everyone who heard it revealed a look of confidence on their faces. All of this was brought to them by Yang Chendong, the absolute core. As long as the sixth young master was there, they firmly believed that there wouldn't be any difficulties that could stop them. It was also this existence that led them from nothing to something, from a young age to an adult, to achieve the results they had now. The actions of one person could affect everyone present. This was the important role of a core. Noticing that everyone's faces had become more confident, Yang Chendong continued, "There are 4 steps to dealing with the Japanese Army's navy. Cavalry attack the Vietnamese line, Navy attack Awaji Island, 2 areas of scorched earth, South Sea encircle but don't attack." These 20 words meant that Yang Chendong had already planned for the attack on the Japanese naval division. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Listening to the detailed strategy from his mouth, everyone in the meeting nodded their heads and looked at him with admiration. Even after becoming the Bugnam of Gojoseon, the sixth young master was still the invincible military god on the battlefield. The meeting went on for more than 2 hours. In the end, everyone in the meeting approved Yang Chendong's military proposal with a unanimous vote. After that, everyone began to divide the work and began to do their own things. As the person who proposed the plan, Yang Chendong's main task this time was to set Ping in Beijing as a deterrent to anyone who wanted to attack on him. He believed that with him in the formation, anyone who wanted to attack Ping in Beijing would have to think carefully before doing so. In addition to being in the middle of the formation, Yang Chendong also took the 2 plans of the cavalry attack the Vietnamese line and the navy attack Awaji Island. At this moment, standing in front of him was the new army's commander, Su He. This was originally a general in the Tatar army. He could be said to be an all-rounder. Ever since he surrendered to the 5-star army, he displayed all his talents and finally became a true general in the 5-star army. He also held the position of commander of the army. People like this were usually very proud. This might be a common problem for talented people. However, when facing Yang Chendong, he didn't dare to show even the slightest bit of his temper. There was no other reason other than the fact that the strength of the person in front of him was far greater than his. Perhaps when 2 people's strength were equal, they wouldn't be convinced of each other's strength. Or if one side was slightly stronger, the other side would want to surpass him at any time. However, when one side was much stronger than the other, even if they tried to catch up, they wouldn't be able to surpass him in time. What was left was only admiration and admiration. Yang Chendong, who had the absolute right to speak and had absolute authority, faced Su He without any pleasantries. He directly said, "This time, the 1st Cavalry Division will stay in Ping in Beijing. Next, it will be the time for the new army to play the main role. Are you confident?" "Sixth young master, we are confident. I am willing to make a military pledge." Knowing that the world's 1st Cavalry Division was finally not going to steal the limelight, he immediately said with some excitement. Although he was very proud in his heart, even when the world's 1st Cavalry Division was established, he was a very popular candidate for the position of commander. Later, he took the initiative to develop his style and gave the position to Tian Hu, which became a kind of story. There were also people who always talked about this matter. They said that even if He became the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, he might not be worse than Tian Hu. Every time he heard this, He's face would have a satisfied and humble smile. However, only he knew in his heart that Tian Hu was indeed very capable. Even if he didn't choose to give up at that time and really became the commander, he might not be able to do better than Tian Hu. Although he admired Tian Hu's ability in his heart, the proud he wouldn't say it out loud. On the contrary, he used this as a motivation to constantly push himself forward. He hoped that one day he could surpass Tian Hu and let everyone know that when he gave the position of commander to Tian Hu, he really did it, and not because he was forced to. A person with a goal needed an opportunity. Now that Yang Chendong put the opportunity in front of him, how could He not fight for it? Therefore, at this time, he patted his chest and promised. His appearance really made people worry that he would hit himself and cause internal injuries. Good, it's good that you are confident. Yang Chendong timely said, stopping He's self-harm, and then talked about the specific matters. The so-called cavalry attack on the Vietnam line referred to the land route from Ping in Beijing to Ge County, which was part of Nanhai Province. The distance between the two sides was a bit too close. If this place was not pacified, Ping and Beijing would be attacked at any time, and long-term stability would become a joke. Ge County, which was separated from Nanhai Province, naturally became a place that had to be attacked. It also gave the new army an opportunity to perform. The investigation data from the intelligence department has been sent over. Ge County is not small, and it is only close to the bustling Ping and Beijing. It has a dense population of 800,000 civilians and 80,000 soldiers. This time, your new army will only have 40,000 soldiers from the 1st and 2nd Divisions, in addition to your new army's 3 cavalry divisions. With 60,000 soldiers against 80,000, and at the same time facing an extremely unfamiliar environment and terrain, you must mentally prepare yourself for a bitter battle. In addition, your new army will also need to send a cavalry division to help the 1st Reserve Division and the 3rd Division to attack Awaju Island. I hope that the cavalry division you send out will be an elite division, understand? As Yang Chendong said this, he didn't forget to carefully look at He's face. Things had to be prioritized, and people were easily swayed by emotions. Since he was going to send a cavalry division to help the 1st Reserve Division, there was a high possibility that He would selfishly send out the weakest division in order to complete his mission. If that happened, the mission of attacking Awaju Island would undoubtedly become more difficult. This was not something that Yang Chendong wanted to see. Where there were people, there would be internal strife. This was a principle that had never changed since ancient times. Yang Chendong did not attempt to change him. But since he had the final say here, then he definitely would not allow internal strife to affect the overall situation and affect the plan. If someone really did that, then they should just go to wherever it was cool and stay there. It was not easy to find a 3-legged toad, but there were plenty of 2-legged people. Hearing Yang Chendong's reminder, he immediately stood at attention and said solemnly, "6th young master, please do not worry. He will not let you down. The cavalry division sent to Awaju Island will definitely be the most elite." Very good. This is actually to help you complete your mission better. Because once we attack Awaju Island, the 1st Reserve Division will come back to reinforce you. At that time, it will greatly reduce the pressure on you. Do you understand? Yang Chendong nodded in satisfaction. He believed that since he had said this much, as long as He was not stupid, he should know how to cooperate. He left. The military plan was already in his heart. Next, he called a meeting with the 4 division commanders to discuss the matter of sending out troops. After he left, the 1st Reserve Division's division commander, Su Kuda, walked into the main tent with a face full of excitement and came in front of Yang Chendong. As the 1st Division commander of the 1st Reserve Division, Su-kuda knew that he was someone who was about to be put in an important position. He was the important reserve cadre that everyone was talking about. The premise was that as long as he performed well, his future would naturally not be worrying. Therefore, during his time as the division commander of the 1st Reserve Division, he scrupulously abided by his duties and only focused on his job. That was to gather the veterans who had been on the battlefield and had been tempered by the battlefield under his wing. He took care of them and trained them strictly. Considering that the 1st Reserve Division did not have any war missions and only continuously absorbed qualified and mature veterans, and continuously accommodated them, it caused the original 20,000 people of a division to reach the current 35,000 people. It was completely qualified to be called an army. Although he was called a division commander, he was indeed leading an army of soldiers. If it were any other general, they would have already become arrogant. At the very least, they would have taken the initiative to ask for money and use this to expand their influence. However, when it came to Su-kuda, he did not do that. Not only that, but he also changed from a division commander to a logistics manager. Considering that the soldiers were from various ethnic groups and regions, he did his best to care about their lives and not let them have the thought that they were excluded from the collective. It was precisely because of his correct guidance that although the composition of the 1st Reserve Division was extremely complicated, there were no incidents of infighting among the soldiers. This was already very difficult. This naturally attracted Yang Chendong's praise and attention. Since he was a useful talent, Yang Chendong naturally would not let his own hands be covered in dust. This time, he called Su-kuda over to assign him an important military mission. Good steel could not always be polished. It had to be unsheathed to see blood. Chapter 1108. Su-kuda also knew that there was a task for him. At this moment, he was very excited, but he still tried his best to show a calm face. How is the army's morale? As soon as they met, Yang Chendong did not immediately give him a task, but was concerned about the army's morale. Replying to the 6th young master, there is no problem at all. All the soldiers are people who have experienced life and death on the battlefield, and now they are eager to achieve more merits. Su-kuda answered truthfully. Yang Chendong nodded lightly. The composition of your 1st Reserve Division is complicated. Although they are not new recruits and know the discipline of the army, because they have all seen blood and killed people, and some of them have even walked out of life and death situations, these people are often harder to manage. If there is a mistake, it will be a big problem. As the head steward, you have to put in a lot of effort, especially thinking, you can't stop for a moment. Even Yang Chendong had called out the name of the head steward, causing Su-kuda to smile mischievously and guarantee, 6th young master, please rest assured, this student will not dare to neglect even a little bit. Su-kuda, who had graduated from the Academy of Crimson City, called himself a student was not a problem. After all, the title of the first dean of the Academy of Crimson City was Yang Chendong's. Good, it's good that you have such confidence. Since that is the case, I can pass on the next task to you without worry. Come, tell this young master what you know about Awaju Island. Yang Chendong began to test the other party. Many times, in a war, you need to know yourself and know your enemy. It is not something that can be done well just by being hot-blooded. Hearing Yang Chendong call himself the young master in front of him, Su-kuda was a little excited. After Yang Chendong was given the title of Bugnam of Gojoseon by the Emperor of Baiming, in most situations he called himself the king. Only in front of people he thought were close would he call himself the young master. Since Su-kuda was able to enjoy such treatment, it proved that he had already become a close person in Yang Chendong's eyes. Naturally, he was very excited. In order to perform better, he gathered his words and said, 6th young master, Awaju Island is an independent island. It is the bridge between Nanhai Province and Ge Prefecture, as well as the transit station for goods. As long as we occupy this place, the entire South Sea Road will be isolated. Listening to Su-kuda's knowledge of Awaju Island, Yang Chendong nodded with satisfaction from time to time. It was good that the other party had done the work in advance. He liked the officers under him to use their brains. Only such people could better deal with complicated situations. Only then could they cope with changes by sticking to the status quo. Only then could they take charge of one side of the battlefield. Not long after, Su Kuda also left in satisfaction. In the end, Yang Chendong handed the task of capturing Awaju Island to the 1st Preparatory Division. There were 50,000 Japanese army soldiers there. It was enough to fill their stomachs. Of course, what made Su Kuda even more excited was that Yang Chendong had already promised that if the 1st Preparatory Division had soldiers who performed well, they could be considered to be promoted to the Cold Front Division or the 1st World Cavalry Division. Whether it was the Cold Front Division or the 1st Cavalry Division, they were all the best of the best in the 5-star army. Every soldier would be proud to be able to enter one of them. Not to mention other things, just being able to enter the Han Dynasty was the dream of many people. If you don't believe me, you can take a look at the treatment of the Han people in Yangtze. It would definitely make other people envious. A person's birth couldn't be changed, but through hard work, one could be promoted to the Han Dynasty. From there, one's descendants would have the opportunity to become a respected existence. That was also a very good thing. This was also why many of the foreign soldiers who joined the 5-star army often performed very well on the battlefield. With such a great temptation, there were very few people who could refuse. Now that he had received Yang Chendong's promise, it could be seen that once the foreign soldiers below heard this news, it would be impossible for them not to fight with all their might. After talking to Su He and Su Kuda separately, Yang Chendong picked up the secret letters and documents on the desk. His attention was focused on Sensei Naganabu of Shanin, sending troops to attack Nankado, stabilizing the east and south of the Japanese Empire, and at the same time destroying the Japanese Naval Division. This would completely cut off their escape route. This was one of Yang Chendong's plans. However, whether or not this plan could be carried out ultimately depended on whether Ashikaga Yoshimasa would come out and cause trouble. In truth, the time for the army to enter the Japanese Empire was not completely ripe. At the very least, the number of soldiers was far from Yang Chendong's expectations. Currently, in the Asian region, the Japanese Empire was second only to the Great Ming Dynasty. Whether it was the population or the strength of the army, the Japanese Empire was ranked at the top. When facing such a power, it was either not to make a move, or to make a move, one had to make a move until the enemy was eliminated. Otherwise, there would be a lot of trouble. It was also a coincidence that the Emperor of the Backyard Garden could not hold back and made the first move. After the first attack failed, Yang Chendong fell into a passive situation. This was a good opportunity for internal strife, and Yang Chendong absolutely could not miss it. Otherwise, when Ashikaga Yoshimasa unified the entire Japanese Empire, if he wanted to deal with him at that time, he would undoubtedly have to pay a much greater price. Thus, Yang Chendong came. He appeared on the land of the Japanese Empire with a not very sufficient army. This was why he was able to fight steadily and surely. It was not like when he dealt with the other small countries in Southeast Asia, where he did not make a move, but once he made a move, he would use thunderous means. Since he knew that he did not have enough troops, Yang Chendong had to think of other methods. The best method he could think of was to use the Japanese against the Japanese. Nurturing a force to let the Neon people fight against the Neon people was like how the traitor Old Wang was supported by the Neon people of later generations. Thus, Masashi Naganabu became an important chess piece. A lot of secret letters were written about Sensei Naganabu. Most of them were good news. The last secret letter wrote that Sensei Naganabu had unified most of the warlords in the Shanin-do, and the military strength had increased from the original 10,000 to 50,000. Of course, Sensei Naganabu had the wisdom to do this, but more than that, it was because Yang Chendong could afford it. In the face of absolute benefits, not many Japanese army generals could resist the temptation. It was just that 50,000 people were not enough to face the 100,000 troops led by Maori regularization that were about to enter the Shanin-do. Looking at the secret letter, Yang Chendong hesitated for a moment, then wrote a note. Add another 1 million silver taels. In any case, Sensei Naganabu cannot be defeated in the short term. After writing this note, Yang Chendong called Beta Persei, who was guarding outside the door, and handed the note to him and asked him to do it immediately. This was related to his conquest of the entire Japanese empire. He could not afford to lose. Beta Persei respectfully took the note and left. Before he left, he handed another urgent telegram to Yang Chendong. This was a telegram from Kusanagi City. Not to mention the content, just the names of Tiger's Mane, Yumian, and Yangtze were all included in the telegram, which was enough to prove the importance of this telegram. Looking at the main body of the telegram, he saw the three of them pleading to send troops to Baiming. Since Yang Chendong sent troops to the Japanese Empire, General Ashikaga Yoshimasa felt extremely pressured. Under the instigation of his subordinates, he asked for help from Baiming. After all, the Japanese Empire was still one of the vassal states of the Ming dynasty, and it was also one of the non-conquering states. Now that they were invaded by the Bugnam of Gojoseon, who was personally appointed by the Emperor of Baiming, it was natural for them to work hard. With the support of Yang Chendong and the financial support of the Baiming Zhu family bank, the Emperor of Baiming, Zhu Qiyu, became arrogant. Originally, he was quite afraid that the development of the five-star army was too strong, and he had long suspected that his achievements would overshadow the emperor. However, considering that his financial resources were tight, he had to endure it. However, with the support of the Zhu family bank, Zhu Qiyu, whose financial resources had greatly increased in a short period of time, finally decided not to sit and watch the development of the five-star army. After communicating with Zhu Qizhen of the Southern Ming dynasty and Yes Hen of the Wala, and everyone's opinions were basically the same, he finally took action. Under Zhu Qiyu's order, all the logistics channels of the grassland five-star army were cut off. For a time, the first city and other places became isolated cities. Fortunately, Yang Chendong was already prepared, so it was not a problem to hold on for a while. The first city had been built for several years, and it had always been self-sufficient, so it was not a big problem for it to be suddenly blocked. However, the situation became very difficult for the new Second Army in Jingzhou and Shajing. Not only did the Baiming army cut off the various channels from the outside world to the first city of the grassland, but they also sent troops to besiege Shajing and Jingzhou. Although they restrained themselves and did not send troops to attack, without any external help, once the city was besieged for too long, it would collapse sooner or later when they ran out of ammunition and food. As the most important minister that Yang Chendong left in the grassland, Tiger's Mane naturally saw the problem. Worried, he found the city lord, Yumian, and the logistics division commander, Yangtze. The three of them sent a telegram at the same time. The general idea was that they were allowed to leave the first city and go to Jingzhou and Shajing to bring the new Second Army back. Yang Chendong had said a long time ago that both the people and the land would exist. With this idea, they wanted to protect the new Second Army. However, such a move would inevitably pass through the area controlled by the Baiming army. If it was not done well, it would cause a big change. Therefore, they asked for instructions from Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong, who sighed in his heart, put down the telegram and closed his eyes to ponder. The great Ming dynasty was still a dynasty with a lot of backbone. Yang Chendong himself did not deny this. It was just that he was too deeply immersed in Confucianism and was used to a comfortable life. It was inevitable that his vision was not long-term enough. Moreover, after Zhu Di, none of the successive monarchs had the intention to expand. It was this period of peace that gave the Western countries a chance to catch up with them. It was precisely because he knew this that Yang Chendong would not let such a thing happen again. He did not want his descendants to blame him. Even if their ideals were not the same, there would be a war sooner or later. However, starting a war now was not what Yang Chendong wanted. Chapter 1109. The war with the Japanese Empire was in a stalemate. If things went wrong, all their previous efforts would be in vain. If the war with Baiming broke out again, not to mention the limited military strength, it was still unknown whether Kikian City's economic system could support two wars. Even so, Yang Chendong still did not regret helping Zhu Qiyu establish the Zhu family bank. This was because it was an act of harming the Great Ming Dynasty's foundation. Even though it was temporary, once there was a problem, it would be the beginning of the collapse of the Great Ming Dynasty. However, it would take time for that to happen, maybe a few years. Without external help, it might be possible to hold on for decades. Yang Chendong could not place all his hopes on the other side to collapse. However, if he did not wait, did he really have to send troops? Not to mention, the intelligence department had already reported that Baiming, South Ming, and Wala had formed a temporary alliance. In terms of military strength, he was at a disadvantage. Even if it was only against Baiming, the five-star army would not be able to win. Tiger's man and the others' worries were reasonable. Fortunately, the new Second Army's commander did not call back to report. This was enough to show that the situation might be very serious, but at least he could hold on. This was the only thing that Yang Chendong was happy about. After all, it was not the right time to start a war with Baiming. He gently put the stun suit aside. Yang Chendong did not return the call or express his stance. It was a sign that Yang Chendong was observing. The most important thing now was to take down Nanhai. As long as the Japanese Empire's navy was completely destroyed, they would be able to control this area. At that time, no news about this place would be leaked. He wanted to see what Zhu Qiyu would do in the absence of any news. 5 days after the high-level military meeting, the military operations against Nanhai began one by one. The first to act was the ships of the 4th Division. They suddenly appeared in the waters of Awaju Island and then attacked with artillery, destroying all the ships on the island's dock. Then, the transport ships sailed to the dock and the 60,000 soldiers led by the 1st Reserve Division disembarked. At this point, the attack on Nanhai Road had officially begun. As the main base of the Japanese Naval Division, they rarely participated in their own country's civil war. Their main territory was on the sea, which gave them a great advantage. Especially in this island country, they could almost move to any area on the sea. Whether it was firing artillery from a distance or finding a suitable place to land, they were all good at it. The Japanese Naval Division also became the biggest trump card of Admiral Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Especially the Marine Commander Kuroda, who was personally promoted by him, is a subordinate that he can absolutely rest assured. This is also why he didn't panic when he saw the sudden appearance of the 5-star army. The Emperor of the Garden of Heaven had died. Although the process was somewhat unexpected, and even brought about a very bad influence on Ashikaga Yoshimasa, it had also caught him off guard. But when he thought about how he had gotten rid of a huge mountain that was pressing down on him, everything seemed to be worth it. As long as he could solve the current civil war, then after a short period of pain, he could reap the harvest. Especially when he saw that the biggest force opposing him, the Flatwell Field, was slowly retreating under the pressure of his army, and was about to be completely wiped out, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was in a good mood. He even began to imagine how he would take back all the territory that the 5-star army had swallowed after the civil war was resolved, and then make them leave the Japanese Empire with their tails between their legs. He never thought that the 5-star army, in a situation where they were clearly at a disadvantage, would actually dare to suddenly attack Nanhai Road and launch a sudden attack on the Flatwell Field Island. This completely unexpected move really caught Ashikaga Yoshimasa off guard. Baka, King Wunan of Daimyong, you can't keep your word. In the army camp, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was angry. When the commander was angry, the others naturally kept their mouths shut, afraid that the anger would affect them. Among them was the famous Fukada Tani, who had returned after being defeated in Ping and Beijing. At that time, the Grand General had left 30,000 soldiers for him to guard Ping and Beijing. He thought that this was the safest job and immediately patted his chest and promised that as long as Ping and Beijing was there, he would be there, and as long as Ping and Beijing wasn't there, he would die. Thus, he was praised by Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Then, the 5-star army launched a sudden attack. First, it was the artillery bombardment that reduced the number of soldiers in the army to freezing point. Then, the 1st Cavalry Division's attack began. The terror of this army was still lingering in Fukada Tani's mind. When he thought about how the enemy had attacked the city in just an hour, forcing him to flee in panic. His legs couldn't help but tremble. Then, Fukada Tani met up with the main force and came to Ashikaga Yoshimasa's side. At this moment, no one mentioned the military promise from before. As long as the city was there, the people would be there, and the people would die if the city was lost. However, he knew in his heart that the Grand General definitely hadn't forgotten about this. As expected, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was angry, started to look at the generals below him. When his gaze moved to the front of Fukada Valley, it stopped moving and slowly came to a stop. Even though he didn't raise his head, he could still feel the burning gaze. Fukada Tani slowly raised his head and saw Ashikaga Yoshimasa's scrutinizing gaze. This scene scared him so much that he almost screamed. Fukada Tani raised his head, and then his face was filled with fear. Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't care about this, because he had already spoken. Kun Fukada, I'll give you 50,000 soldiers. Can you take back Ping and Beijing? This sentence could be understood as giving you a chance to make up for your mistakes. Do you want to take it or not? The strength of the 5-star army had already been proven. Let alone 50,000 soldiers, even if they doubled it by 100,000, so what? He didn't see the Maori regularization who led 100,000 soldiers to attack and defeated and killed the hegemon of the Shanin Road, Uehara Toda, didn't seem to have any intention of moving towards Ping and Beijing. Instead, he went to the Shanin Road. Even this famous general knew to pick on the weak. Fukada Tani was far inferior to this person in all aspects. How could he take back Ping and Beijing? Ping and Beijing was lost in his hands. Now was equivalent to giving him a chance to make up for it. If he refused out of fear, with Ashikaga Yoshimasa's temper, he would probably never be able to make a name for himself. Whether he stretched his neck or retracted his neck, he would be stabbed. At least if he accepted this task, he would be able to live for a few more days. Perhaps he would be able to create a miracle. Helpless, Fukada Tani could only pretend to be full of fighting spirit and say, "General, don't worry. 50,000 soldiers is enough to take back Ping and Beijing." As soon as he said this, the other generals looked at Fukada Tani as if they were looking at an idiot. But then they all closed their mouths. Since this was an impossible task, it was better to act tough than to pretend to be a coward. In fact, not only the others, but even Ashikaga Yoshimasa himself knew that with just Fukada Tani and 50,000 soldiers, it was impossible for him to pose a big threat to the 5-star army in Ping and Beijing. However, he still did so. Naturally, he had his own reasons for doing so. There was no need for him to tell anyone else. Fukada Tani happily accepted the task. Ashikaga Yoshimasa naturally did not want to make trouble for him. He only said that he had already chosen the 50,000 soldiers for him. The provisions for the army should also be prepared. They could prepare for today and set off tomorrow. Thus, the military meeting ended. After the meeting ended, all the colleagues looked at Fukada Tani differently. It was as if they were looking at a dead man. Everyone could imagine that he had already lost Ping and Beijing and failed once. If he failed again this time, of course, he would definitely fail. At that time, it would be the end of his life. Fukada Tani, who could see something in everyone's eyes, could do nothing. Who asked him to be targeted by the great general? Now, other than obeying, the only thing left was to obey. He walked out of the tent pessimistically. When he returned to his camp and heard his deputy's report, he almost cursed out loud. It was also from his deputy that he found out that the 50,000 soldiers that the great general gave him were mostly old, weak, sick, and disabled. Almost all of them were captives. They were the spoils of Ashikaga Yoshimasa's campaign. Although being captives did not necessarily mean that they were not capable, it was not wrong to say that they were greedy for life and afraid of death. What was the difference between using such an army to conquer Ping and Beijing, which was occupied by the elite 5-star army? "General, we do not have much provisions. It is only enough for 15 days. Although the deputy saw that Fukada Tani's expression was not good, he still had to report some things. Otherwise, he would not be able to do his job properly. 15 days of provisions? Ha! Fukada Tani suddenly found that he was not so angry anymore. On the contrary, he even laughed. Of course, this was not true happiness. It was a kind of sad and bitter laughter because of his uncertain future. It would take at least 8 to 10 days to travel from Yuezhong Prefecture to Ping in Beijing. However, he was only given 15 days of provisions. Didn't that mean that he was only given 5 days to attack? If he failed, there would be no provisions in the army, and it would be impossible for him to retreat safely. It was a mission that he would not be able to return from. Fukada Tani did not understand why the great general made such an arrangement. Was it just because he was not pleasing to the eye? Then why didn't he just give the order to kill him directly? Why was this so? Of course, only Ashikaga Yoshimasa knew the reason. At this time, in his tent, the captain of the samurai team, Yamaguchi Fukada, was standing there with a nervous expression. Previously, he received the mission to kill Matsumoto Kazuma. Although he did not see the corpse, based on his many years of experience, he thought that his old opponent who had lost too much blood would definitely die. When he returned to the great general, he reported the same thing. But who would have thought that in the end, Matsumoto Kazuma did not die? Instead, he stood up and publicly accused the great general. Chapter 11:10. Yamaguchi Fukada had been nervous about this matter. He didn't know how the Supreme General would punish him. This time, he was called to the main tent. He was very nervous, fearing that he would be held accountable for what happened last time. Ashikaga Yoshimasa was somewhat disappointed with Yamaguchi Fukada. He had even sent his own divine archery battalion to him, but he couldn't even kill Matsumoto Kazuma. He even ruined his plan because of this. It was impossible for him not to hate him. Considering that Yamaguchi Fukada's ability was not bad, he didn't punish him. On the contrary, he wanted to give him an opportunity to make a great contribution. Yamaguchi-kun, this time I called you here to give you a special mission. Go to Ping in Beijing to assassinate King Wunan of Daimyang. Is there a problem? What? He thought that he would be reprimanded or even punished. Even if he had to suffer some physical pain, it would be normal. He didn't expect that he would be asked to carry out a mission, and the mission was to assassinate King Wunan of Daimyang. Looking at Yamaguchi Fukada's surprised expression, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was a little unhappy. His voice was a little low because of this. What? You don't want to go? Yamaguchi Fukada, who finally recovered, first nodded, then realized something. He quickly shook his head and said, I'm willing to go, I'm willing to go. Please rest assured, Supreme General. This time there won't be an accident. I will bring back King Wunan of Daimyang's head. It was no wonder that Yamaguchi Fukada was so excited. He was completely different from Fukada Tani. The latter was a general in the army. He paid attention to controlling the overall situation on the battlefield and strategizing. Since he was a martial arts expert, he should be carrying out a special mission. It would be a great waste to throw such a person into the battlefield and fight him openly. It was precisely because of his position that Yamaguchi Fukada knew that his opportunity had come after hearing the Supreme General's mission. If he could complete it well, it would be a matter of fame and fortune. It would also make up for some of his previous mistakes. He wouldn't have to live in fear in the future. Yamaguchi Fukada's excitement was within Ashikaga Yoshimasa's expectations. If samurai were afraid and knew fear, then perhaps the Japanese Empire would really be hopeless. After getting a satisfactory answer, Ashikaga Yoshimasa reached out and patted Yamaguchi Fukada's shoulder. He said very encouragingly, "Very good. There will be people in Ping and Beijing who will cooperate with you. Fukada Tani's 50,000 soldiers will also attract the enemy's attention and create an opportunity for you to act. Hey, Supreme General, please rest assured. If I can't complete the mission this time, Yamaguchi won't come back." He made his own promise. Samurai were not like soldiers. They were true to their words. If they said so, then they would really live and die together with the mission. This made Ashikaga Yoshimasa even more happy. He seemed to have seen the scene of King Wunan of Daimyang being killed. At that time, the leaderless five-star army would be nothing in his eyes. On Yang Chendong's side, some information about Ashikaga Yoshimasa had also been sent to him. When he saw that the Supreme General of the Japanese Empire had sent 50,000 soldiers to attack Ping in Beijing, he couldn't help but smile. Did he think that 50,000 soldiers could threaten the safety of Ping in Beijing? The one who had come was Fukada Tani, whom he had defeated before. Yang Chendong really didn't know what to say. Of course, he was not a god. He didn't know that a samurai team was secretly coming to Ping in Beijing to take his life. Now, he was thinking about how to deal with the 50,000 Japanese army. Ping in Beijing had been occupied, but it wasn't very peaceful. After all, in the eyes of the Japanese Empire, Yang Chendong was an invader. Most of the people could only swallow their anger because of the strength of the five-star army. However, there were still some people who had been resisting. It was just like when they invaded China in the future. Many people resisted in various ways. Although they were called ordinary people, they were nothing in front of the armed soldiers. However, many ants could bite an elephant to death. Therefore, during this period of time, Yang Chendong had been leading the migration of people. Speaking of which, why was there so little resistance when Yang Xie had occupied so many places? It was because of the migration of people. When a person wanted to resist and was suddenly transferred to another place, they would have to face a strange group of people, or even a foreign race that they didn't know. Not to mention joining forces with others to organize a resistance. Whether or not they could do such a thing without being reported was something that they should be on guard against. Correspondingly, the most important thing to do in a foreign land was to find a foothold for oneself, not to think about the country and its people. Everyone was unfamiliar with each other, and there was no basic trust between them. In order to live a better life in a foreign land, everyone was thinking of ways to build a solid foundation. At this time, if they could report other people's wrongdoings and gain the attention and rewards of the five-star army and Yang Xie, it would be very beneficial for them to start a new life. People were selfish. After knowing that resistance was useless, the most they would think about was how to adapt to the situation and live a better life. It was with this mentality that the voices of opposition were completely suppressed, and they slowly moved towards a new life. Yang Chendong adopted the same strategy for the Japanese Empire. What he wanted was to break up the Japanese Empire and reorganize it. In the end, he wanted to completely kill some people's thoughts of revenge and resistance. The migration of people in Ping and Beijing was also in progress. However, because this was the capital of the Japanese Empire, there were more than 1.5 million people. It would take time to achieve what he wanted. Ping and Beijing was not stable internally, so it was not suitable for there to be any foreign enemies. Otherwise, it would be tantamount to giving hope to those who already wanted to feel at ease. Once the 1.5 million people of the Japanese Empire all stood up and resisted, the five-star army would really have to leave here. I can't let Fukada Tani bring the army to Ping and Beijing, even if their strength is average. Yang Chendong said in his heart. Then his brain was working quickly to find a solution. After the blood transfusion, Matsumoto Fuma's physical condition was getting better day by day. After all, he was at the level of a special ninja. As long as he didn't really lose an arm or a leg, there wouldn't be any major problems. Matsumoto Kazuma, who had recovered 90% of his body, began to pay more attention to ninja training and the growth of the ninja team. After experiencing so much, he knew that if he wanted to live and live well, he must have enough strength. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would only become cannon fodder in the eyes of others. With such a belief, and Yang Chendong gave enough money for training funds, the ninja team began to recover step by step and walked on the right track. Matsumoto Kazuma, who was participating in the training, finally had a smile on his face. He seemed to see the hope of the future ninja. At this time, Beta Persei suddenly appeared in the ninja training ground. For this Bugnam of Gojoseon's close aide, Matsumoto Kazuma knew how powerful he was, so he quickly put down the work in his heart and took the initiative to come and greet him. Matsumoto Kazuma, young master wants to see you, come with me. After just glancing at Matsumoto Kazuma, Beta Persei announced the purpose of his visit, then turned and left. The reason why he personally came to announce this task was to see the enthusiasm of the ninja training. Now that he has a general impression, he can go back and report. Knowing that Bugnam of Gojoseon wanted to see him, Matsumoto Kazuma didn't dare to have any neglect. After agreeing, he walked behind Beta Persei. Along the way, he kept saying good things, trying to get some practical information from Beta Persei's mouth. Matsumoto Fujin had done some research on the Han people and knew that they were a nation with human emotions. A lot of things are about human relationships. As a ninja's spokesperson, different from those ninjas who only know how to train, Matsumoto Kazuma has some ways to deal with human relationships. But in the face of Beta Persei, all the words are meaningless and even led to a reprimand. Matsumoto Kazuma, I'm warning you for the last time. You'd better do what the young master wants you to do, and don't inquire about things that you shouldn't know. Otherwise, you'll be looking for trouble, big trouble. When it comes to big trouble, Beta Persei's voice raised a few notches. Matsumoto Kazuma's forehead was covered in a layer of cold sweat when he saw the serious expression on Matsumoto's face. He repeatedly promised that he would be obedient in the future and wouldn't ask random questions and break the rules of the army. Matsumoto Kazuma, who was scared by Beta Persei, was scared again when he entered Yang Chendong's tent. Matsumoto Kazuma, I'll give you a task. If you complete it well, your ninja training fund will be increased by 50,000 silver. If you don't complete it well, you have to be prepared to lose your life there. The polarization was so serious that Matsumoto Kazuma didn't know what to say, because from beginning to end, he didn't have a choice. Thinking of Beta Persei's warning, he had to pinch his nose and said, "Yes, please give the order to Bugnam of Gojoseon." Well, the task is very clear. Persuade Fukada Tani, who is rushing to Ping in Beijing, to turn to Shanin Road and cooperate with Sensei Naganabu there to deal with Maori regularization. After giving out the task very simply, Yang Chendong sat with his arms crossed and looked at Matsumoto Kazuma, waiting for his answer. Persuade Fukada Tani, this is the way Yang Chendong came up with to deal with Ashikaga Yoshimasa. If the task is done, there will be no war in Ping and Beijing, which is of course very important for the smooth implementation of the migration plan. As for whether it can be done or not, he is not worried, it just depends on whether the price paid is enough. On the contrary, the person to be sent to persuade him gave him a headache. Later, he found out from the resources that Matsumoto Kazuma and Fukada Tani have a good personal relationship. After all, they used to work together in Ping and Beijing. So he decided to give the task to this person. It turned out to be a surrender mission. Shouldn't ninjas carry out assassinations? Matsumoto Kazuma could only think in his heart, but he didn't dare to say it out loud. In his eyes, Yang Chendong was too strong. Not only was he strong, but the three special ninjas also said that this person's strength was extremely high, and even the three special ninjas were not his opponent. Such a person said such words, he didn't dare to refuse, and he couldn't refuse. Whether unwilling or not, at least at this moment, Matsumoto Kazuma completely agreed. Chapter 11:11. Northern Road, Ruasua County. This was the border between Shanin Road and the Japanese Empire's capital, Ping and Beijing, was in the south. They took their time along the way. Originally, they could have finished the journey in 8 to 10 days. However, with Shen Tianya leading the way, they walked for 11 days. When night came, he was in the temporary military tent with a worried face. The provisions that they brought could only last for 4 days. Once this news was spread, the morale of the 50,000 soldiers would be immediately disrupted. At that time, no one dared to imagine what would happen. At this moment, Fukada Tani felt like an abandoned child. He had a home but could not return. He had become a rootless tree. It was already late at night. Outside the tent, only the sound of patrolling soldiers could be heard. Fukada Tani was still standing in front of the map with a worried face. This time, they had to deal with the 5-star army. The shadow of the previous failure had not completely dissipated. Thinking of the power of the cannons and the bravery of the cavalry, he did not even have a 10% chance of winning. Although Ashikaga Yoshimasa had told him that the 5-star army had already attacked Nanhai Road, there should not be many soldiers left in Ping and Beijing. However, Fukada Tani did not think this way. King Wunan of Daimyong was in Ping in Beijing. How could he not leave some elite soldiers by his side? Not to mention other things, just leaving some firearms behind would be enough to stop them from advancing. It was true that there were 50,000 soldiers, but he knew better than anyone else what kind of quality they were. If they were fighting a smooth battle, they might have some skills. However, once they met a strong enemy, these people would probably run away. Such a strong opponent was actually sent to fight, and only 50,000 weak soldiers. This made Fukada Tani want to curse. He suspected that this was Ashikaga Yoshimasa's plan to kill with a borrowed knife. Everything was because he lost Ping in Beijing, as well as a large amount of gold, silver, and provisions. But who could be blamed for all this? He believed that even if the great general had been in Ping and Beijing, he would have chosen to avoid him. Thinking of this, Fukada Tani couldn't help but sigh helplessly. What made Kun Fukada so worried in the middle of the night? The voice that suddenly sounded from within the large tent seemed so out of place in the silent night, yet it was also so clear that it could be heard. In an instant, Fukada Tani felt goosebumps all over his body. Out of instinct, he couldn't help but yell, "Who is it? Is it a human or a ghost?" Seeing Fukada Tani's big reaction, a person walked out from a corner of the tent and said with a smile, "Kun Fukada, don't be nervous. An old friend has come to see you." Borrowing the dim candlelight in the tent, Fukada Tani was finally able to clearly see the person who had arrived. He then said, "So it's Kun Matsumoto. Aren't you familiar?" Seeing that Fukada Tani had finally reacted, Matsumoto Kazuma laughed and came to less than 2 meters in front of him. He said, "Yes, I've already defected to the 5-star army, but we're still friends, aren't we? We had the same experience. We were both abandoned by Ashikaga Yoshimasa, weren't we?" Matsumoto Kazuma's entry point was very good. He found the same experience that both of them had. Back then, he was also one of the people that the great general valued the most. However, when he didn't complete his mission well, he was met with a bloody massacre. If it wasn't for the 5-star army saving him, he would have already been a dead man. Fukada Tani was the same. As a former famous person, he wasn't a nobody. Because he held a portion of the military power, he was also one of the people that the great general roped in. However, after the death of the emperor, the great general's strength grew again and again. His strength was no longer in the great general's eyes. Especially after losing Ping in Beijing, he didn't have a good day. He was always in fear and didn't know when the great general would come to find trouble with him. Now it was even better. He brought 50,000 weak soldiers to battle. What he had to face was the 5-star army, which was known as the strongest in the world. This was clearly an act of seeking death. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was an abandoned child. On the contrary, it was very appropriate. In a way, the two of them were both abandoned children. In the past, they were very familiar with each other. Now that they had the same experience and met again, they had a lot of feelings and even a sense of identity. This was one of the reasons why Yang Chendong sent Matsumoto Kazuma to carry out the mission. Two people who had the same experience would always have more things to talk about. Not to mention, with Matsumoto Kazuma's ability, once things went wrong, it wouldn't be easy to make him stay. This gave the matter a 30% chance of success. When others said that he was an abandoned child, Fukada Tani would more or less defend himself. It was also possible that he would accuse the other party of slander. If it was Matsumoto Kazuma who said this, he wouldn't have any doubts. Everyone was too familiar with each other. There were some things that really didn't need to be explained. Another sigh came from Fukada Tani's mouth. He didn't expect that the two of them would meet in such a situation. Moreover, they were both abandoned children. The past could only be recalled and reminisced. People still had to face reality. After all, Fukada Tani was a famous person. He had some strategies. He quickly threw away the unhappiness in his heart and said, "Kun Matsumoto, you came here in the middle of the night. Presumably, you want to kill me. It's fine. Dying in the hands of an old friend isn't a regrettable thing. I just have to trouble you to make your move quickly and let me suffer less." The two of them didn't have the same standpoint. They were no longer friends and had become enemies. They also knew Matsumoto Kazuma's ability. It was impossible to resist. Fukada Tani simply accepted his fate. After he finished speaking, he closed his eyes and looked like he was waiting for death. Fukada Tani didn't even resist. This was somewhat out of Matsumoto Kazuma's expectations. However, when he thought about how even if he didn't kill him, when faced with the powerful 5-star army, there wouldn't be much of an outcome, he felt relieved. It was just that this time he didn't come to kill, so he deliberately pretended to be surprised and asked, "Kun Fukada, why do you say that? We are friends. How could I come to kill you?" "You didn't come to kill me?" Fukada Tani opened his eyes at this moment. In fact, when Matsumoto Kazuma appeared and didn't immediately attack him, he could feel that the other party didn't really want to kill him. Otherwise, he could have just attacked directly. Just now, he was just putting on an act to show that even if he died, he wouldn't call for people to attack his former friend. Of course, as a friend, not only will I not harm Kun Fukada, but I will also save you this time. Since he said this, Matsumoto Kazuma didn't hesitate. He told him that King Wunan of Daemyang originally wanted to kill him, but after he found out, he pleaded for mercy and said that he would personally go and persuade him. At the same time, he also told him that he would give Fukada Tani a way out. According to Matsumoto Kazuma's words, Fukada Tani was still a very capable person. This kind of person shouldn't be abandoned and die as cannon fodder. He should display his value. So he came. Fukada Tani naturally wouldn't believe Matsumoto Kazuma's words so easily. He even suspected that this was King Wunan of Daemyang's intention. However, there was no point in dwelling on this now. The most important thing was to know that he was still useful and didn't have to die. This was the most important thing. Immediately, he pretended to be very grateful and said, "Kun Matsumoto is very considerate, but I don't know what King Wunan of Daemyang wants me to do." Matsumoto Kazuma, who had prepared a lot of things to say, didn't expect things to go so smoothly. This made him a little surprised. But after all, it was a good thing. He immediately said, "Bugnam of Gojoseon hopes that Kun Fukada can repent and be saved. In the current situation, it's only a matter of time before Ashikaga Yoshimasa is destroyed. What we need to do is to make the right choice in life. For example, we need to rely on Bugnam of Gojoseon and the 5-star army. Will they accept us?" Kun Fukada asked without hesitation. He wasn't playing any tricks. With his current status, he really didn't have any other choice. Since the Grand General had already abandoned him, he might as well save himself. Although his future was still uncertain, at least he could live for a few more days, right? Of course they will. I have already convinced Bugnam of Gojoseon, and Bugnam of Gojoseon also said that as long as Kun Fukada can show enough sincerity, the 5-star army is willing to accept you. When the time comes, high positions and generous salaries will be waiting for us in front of us. Matsumoto Kazuma seemed to be getting more and more excited as he spoke. It was as if everything would go smoothly if they relied on Yang Chendong. Really? That's great. Fukada Tani also said very cooperatively, but then the excitement on his face disappeared. "But Kun Matsumoto, I'm afraid that you don't know my current situation. Right now, my rations can only last for 4 days. Once I don't have enough rations, I'm afraid that there will be a mutiny in the army. At that time, even if I want to rely on the 5-star army, I'm afraid that I won't have the strength and time to do so." That was a condition he was proposing. Since they were going to surrender, they should at least get something in return. Otherwise, why would they listen to their commands and work for them? A 50,000 army only had 4 days of rations. This was the first time Matsumoto Kazuma heard of this. But it didn't matter. Before he came, Yang Chendong had given him a lot of support. So after hearing this, he didn't panic too much. Instead, he laughed and said, "Kun Fukada doesn't need to be so distressed. If you don't have rations, we can buy them." "Oh right, this time, Bugnam of Gojoseon, in order to welcome Kun Fukada, specially asked me to bring 500,000 taels of silver. It is now in a forest 10 miles away from the camp. If you need it, you can go and get it at any time." The Dafe kingdom was finally destroyed, and the silver mine on the island was also taken by Yang Xie. This greatly reduced the need for silver. With money, Yang Chundong naturally had more confidence. What he used to do against the Japanese Empire was to use money to pave the way. This was to preserve his strength to the greatest extent. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.